G'day, mate. Look forward back here with Rony Guldmann. Want to talk about the transgender issue. So, Ronnie's got a great work in progress, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression on the Nature and Origins of Conservaphobia. Ronnie, when we were kicking around possible topics for a show, why does the transgender issue particularly interest you these days?
Well, I've been, struggling. I know that to adequately publicize both conservative claims of cultural oppression and my memoir, I need to find a way to relate some of their core intuitions to some of the issues of the day, because not everyone, unlike yourself, has the patience to read through the entire thing and then think about it. So that struck me, and as a venue that kind of can be used, an issue that can be used to concretize and particularize some of the ideas in that book. And I'm just sort of at the beginning of that process. It's not that easy when I've been spending 10 plus years um over writing these like large manuscripts, and I've got to find a way to somehow convey at least part of the gist through an 800 word essay. So that's I'm just trying to train my mind to think in those in those terms. And transgenderism, it's the sort of thing which is uh, an issue that's really fraught with all sorts of philosophical questions. It's also fraught with cultural and antagonism. I think probably many conservatives see the transgender movement as the ultimate embodiment of the liberal manipulation to which they feel subject in a host of spheres. So that's kind of what I had. I wrote about it very briefly in Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, where I kind of wrote sort of the idea of a gender identity is kind of like superseding and then occupying a higher metaphysical plane than visible biological sex. Could it itself be viewed as one expression of these spiritual drives, which I argue in the book were secularized from Christianity and then translated into liberalism? So for all those reasons, we get together and we chat it up, every few months. And so I thought um, this is something to try to get some clarity on to the extent it's possible.
Yeah. So, what are the basic reasons that conservatives and liberals and leftists have different reactions to transgender?
Well, I think that so for conservatives, they always have argued that there is kind of an elite culture that is seeking to supplant values and beliefs that originate in common sense. The common sense of the good citizen in ordinary experience, and that somehow the liberal culture is not simply attempting to advance, procure certain rights for certain groups, but is through that trying to replace one reality with another by virtue of occupying of occupying the commanding heights of the culture, I think, which is, I think, a phrase that I got from Jonah Goldberg. Um, and so it seems to resemble that. It resonate with that, and also for me also, I guess at the end of the day, if you were to assess my policy preferences, I would probably be center left. And I have deep reservations about these invocations of science and expertise on the behalf of the transgender movement, because I think that discredits science and expertise, and it gives MAGA conservatives a certain permission structure to deny what should be self-evident truths about things like the COVID vaccine or global warming. So I think that the left needs to get its own house in order, because to the extent it does not, it gives license to the other side to indulge in its own forms of magical thinking.
Okay, great. Let me just read a little bit from your book
Okay.
on transgender. So you don't have much in here, but you cut to the chase. So conservatives sometimes oppose the right of transgendered people to access public restrooms designated for the opposite biological sex. Liberals typically dismiss this opposition as just another narrow bigotry. So this is a practical application of this story. But it need
Right.
not rest on bigotry, and conservatives could make the following case. Biological male is within his rights to self-identify as a female and attach more importance to this inner self-conception than to his biological sex. So I'm flashing back as we're just starting to have this conversation. I'm flashing back to the Declaration of Independence, I believe, that enshrines the pursuit of happiness. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes.
So if that really is a founding ideal of the United States to pursue your happiness, that seems very much a liberal ideal, the classical liberal ideal. And also, if you believe in that ideal, it's hard to argue against people exploring transgender identities. Is that fair?
Well, exploring certainly, but this principle in the end, I go on in that argument to make a sort of a utilitarian case for why we might not, at least in certain situations, allow uh, transgender women to use women's bathrooms or locker rooms, because yes, uh, even if you agree that happiness is the ultimate ideal, and even if you believe that everyone's happiness counts equally, irrespective of any invidious distinctions you might draw between people, nevertheless, in the world as we know it, you can have conflicts between people where their respective happinesses uh, come into conflict, and ideally we can avoid zero sum games, but sometimes you are forced into that position. I think intellectual honesty compels that recognition, so the question is, um, how do you respond to that? And so this is a big issue in Britain. You have the maligned turfs, the otherwise secular left wing feminists, who are nevertheless very critical of gender ideology, and don't like the idea that a biological male can, solely on the basis of his self-identification, access female spaces. Now that's again that's different from actual surgery and actual transition, but solely on the basis of their self-identification. From the transgender left, they're going to say, well, the self-identification is sort of the essence of who we are. So to deny that is to deny someone's dignity. And I can nevertheless come out on the side of the turfs, at least as to, let's say, locker rooms, even if I concede uh the left-wing premise, because I bring in a utilitarian framework. So you've got, I think this was the case with I forget the name of it was like the swimmer U Penn, obvious, you look at him, he's obviously male, he's big, wide shoulders, tall, and so forth, and he's like part of the UPenn swimming team, and apparently, from at least one of his critics says, Riley Gaines, a number of the swimmers were, emotionally distraught at his presence in the locker room, undressing, and they're seeing his junk, and he's seeing theirs. And so let's just frame that problem in terms of in utilitarian terms. So for whatever combination of social and biological reasons, we have a biological male who feels that, notwithstanding that he is female in some higher metaphysical sense, which needs to be acknowledged socially, which others have, an obligation to acknowledge socially. But on the other hand, you have these, 20 women or whatever number in the locker room. And, what do they have? Well, they have, millions of years of biological evolution, even before we became modern Homo sapiens, which predisposed them to be profoundly distraught by that situation. So, I don't need to pass judgment on their, morally or philosophically on their various claims, and which is inherently more legitimate. I just know that in that kind of situation, you've got this one outlier here as compared to 20 women. In that way alone, I would go on the side of the Riley Gaines and the women who are distraught by his presence. I can do that just because this is a situation where there is an irreconcilable conflict. When it comes to bathrooms where you have stalls and so forth, it may be less of an issue. I wouldn't make that argument there necessarily, but in certain situations, it is a zero sum game, and so there maybe as sort of a rational, this worldly, liberal, pragmatic utilitarian, that is the argument I would make. So the question becomes, if that's a cogent way of looking at things, a realistic way that acknowledges zero sum situations, on some occasions, why is it that the better part of the left liberal space will not go that way, and will rather, moralistically insist that the transgender woman is necessarily in the right without thinking things through, as I have? Well, because that's where it connects to the book and my broader work, because even though liberalism will present itself in pragmatic, utilitarian terms, there are certain spiritual drives at work which you can observe in the embrace of transgenderism, in some situations at least.
Now, what's considered right wing in America, in popular understanding, is in large part to do with support for lower marginal tax rates, and
Right.
a vigorous defense of gun ownership rights and other rights. But what's considered right wing in Europe is not primarily concerned with marginal tax rates nor with rights. So an obsession or placing a preeminence on rights strikes me very much as a liberal perspective. And so classical liberal is understood as right wing in America. But the traditionalist, such as myself, the tribalist, such as myself, the nationalist, such as myself, does not put a priority on rights, because that is so individual focused, right? The traditionalist, the nationalist, and the tribalist understands that the ultimate reality is not the individual and his rights, but it's the community, the group, the tribe, the nation. So am I onto something here? Yes, American right-wing political discourse places tremendous emphasis on rights, but that is not what constitutes traditional right wing thinking in Europe, for example.
As to that, I mean, I would say that, the distinctions that you've articulated are certainly probably, valid as a historical matter. All of the National Review conservatives, they were classical liberalism in that they say, well, we are conservatives, we are trying to conserve the classical liberalism, which is distinct to America and sets it apart from the tribalism of the old world. Though, certainly after uh, Trumpism and where we are right now, I'm not sure if those distinctions um, are as clear cut as they used to be. But I understand what you're talking about. No dispute
Right.
there. And so is the critique that you have certain tendencies in America, whether expressed in liberal or conservative slash libertarian terms, which you think kind of favor the transgender cause, and that therefore their cause is countered by a right wing traditionalism as opposed to conservatism.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that as we talk now. If you genuinely believe that the founding principle of this country is the individual's pursuit of happiness, then it's hard to then be philosophically consistent with that pursuit, so long as it does not then impinge on the rights of others. And I guess that is the mainstream American conservative position. Be transgender all you want, just don't impinge on the rights of others. As a trad, as a tribalist, and as a
Uh-huh.
nationalist, I do not place individual happiness at the center of my agenda. I am uncomfortable, unhappy with this emphasis on rights, and I think that there are things far more important than the individual and his rights. So I guess I'm seeing just three very distinct reactions here. The modern liberal left in America, which glorifies the ability of an individual to transcend
Hmm.
traditional concepts of male and female. The modern American conservative movement, which essentially says be trans all you want, uh, up to the point that you then impinge on the rights of others, which I do not hold with. And then I guess as
Hmm.
a traditionalist, I would say what's most important is the welfare of the group, and the welfare of the group, from my traditionalist perspective, depends upon traditional ways of organizing families, individual lives, and communities, including sharp distinctions between male and female. Is there anything there that you want to articulate, talk about?
Yeah, so I would say, so let's say, to respond to what you just said in a way that articulates my left liberal, center left perspective, is that there are claims. Obviously, the transgender movement, to the extent they can, they seek to analogize their own claims to those that were forwarded by the gay rights movement. It's sort of it's a further extension of the same idea, and if you don't get that, then you're just once again behind the times, standing athwart history, as Buckley said, and you will, the judgment of history will be um against you. So I do not buy into that standard liberal framing completely, because I agree that certain transgender claims, if you're saying, well, I shouldn't be discriminated against on the job in hiring or promotion, or in my ability to rent or buy an apartment, those kinds of claims are readily analogized to those of the gay rights movements. Those are rights uh, based claims. But of course, we know that a lot of the controversy surrounding transgenderism is not about those kinds of things. It's about biological males playing in women's leagues. It's about whether to credit the self-identification of a 10-year-old claiming to be transgender. So even though the transgender movement seeks to frame these things in terms of rights, in terms of non-discrimination principles, it's clear to me that they raise issues which, whatever your position, uh, are not cannot be straightforwardly adjudicated in terms of rights and individual dignity. There's a lot more at play. So that is, yeah, because I come from the center left, I guess the liberal tradition, that is where I would break with the transgender uh movement on those sorts of things, because I think they co-opt ideas of rights and non-discrimination to forward an ethos and a worldview that can be rejected or heavily scrutinized by people who fully believe in rights. And I guess, but I understand sort of from a traditionalist point of view, and you can tell me if I'm fairly uh characterizing you. I mean, I guess my question is, what is the threat that conservatives or traditionalists believe is posed by transgenderism to the community? Because when I think about it, it's about what threat do 10-year-olds pose to themselves if they seek puberty blockers. But so I'm thinking about the individual versus the individual. But you as a traditionalist would be thinking about the individual versus the community. But why, I mean, the left liberal suspicion is that conservatives are animated by a kind of visceral hatred, visceral dislike of certain groups who are different. So how would you refute that, if you want to refute that, uh, by tying right wing opposition to transgenderism to the preservation of whatever you deem worth preserving?
Yeah, so I'm going to make an attempt, and I would begin by noting the limitations of human reason. So, as a traditionalist, a tribalist, and a nationalist, I believe that the traditional ways that we have organized families and communities are superior to new ways of organizing families and communities that have not been time tested. So, I am very frightened of pulling on the thread of certain traditions. Like, I'm not very frightened of pulling on the thread of, say, automatic trucks or driverless cars or technology. That does not scare me. But I'm very frightened of pulling on the thread of male-female distinctions. I'm very frightened of pulling on the thread of family organization and communal organization. And so we have traditionally understood that there are overwhelmingly male and female, that male and female has a biological reality, and you don't mess with these basic distinctions. You don't mess with the distinctions between the in-group and the out-group. You don't mess with the distinction between the sacred and the profane. You don't mess with distinctions between parents and children. You don't mess with distinctions between male and female. You don't mess with distinctions between marital sex and non-marital sex, between heterosexual sex and non-heterosexual sex, because we fear the moral anarchy that results when we start doing something completely new that hasn't stood the test of time. So we have all these social practices that we have evolved over thousands of years, and it may be difficult to derive them from first principles of philosophy, but rather these practices have evolved over time by trial and error, to quote Amy Wax. And we recognize that people do not operate primarily through reason, that the most important things that drive people's behavior are their genetics and their their environment. And so this idea that we can transcend our traditional ways of doing things through the power of reason, and to leave behind traditional prescriptive roles, traditional customs, traditional habits that have adjusted people to the messy demands of day-to-day living for millennia is frightening for someone like me. So to boil another way of just boiling it down, we want to test behavior, how it empirically works out in the real world, as opposed to whether our approach to this behavior conforms precisely to philosophical and syllogistic demands. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I would say, is it conceivable that if you were to go back, I don't know, 150 years in America, where you had people with, like, more settled understandings of who were they supposed to be, if you could, notwithstanding all the limits, what strike us as restrictions on their lives, is it possible that, if you were to measure, their dopamine and serotonin, if you go back in time, that it would be higher than ours, notwithstanding all our rights and, freedoms. Um, that's certainly possible. It's also possible that if you were to go back, way back to, to tribal society, to, Rousseau's Noble Savage, that might be even more the case there too, because there you would have a much more uh, perfect alignment between, our biological predispositions and the environment wherein those predispositions evolved, right? A congruence that has been eroded in various ways um ever since. So, so I can kind of accept the idea of a more natural past. Certainly I can see it from a conservative perspective, but I can also do it from, that of Rousseau's Noble Savage as well. And it may well be, the case that sort of there's a certain, tragic irony in the human condition, that, yeah, we what sets us apart is that we develop these minds, and that even though these minds, helped us in all sorts of, easily understandable ways in terms of, survival and security, nevertheless created certain disequilibria that
Ah,
created certain pathologies. I accept that's possible.
I just had a thought if I can jump
Yeah,
in.
go ahead.
Um, I think part of being traditional and also goes along with being tribal and nationalist is a fear of unlimited human freedom, that we fear because the traditionalist will almost always have a skeptical view of human nature. So we don't believe that human nature is basically good. And so we fear what people will get up to if they are not given strong guardrails. And
Yeah.
we recognize, we're intelligent enough to recognize that some of the guardrails that have guided humanity for millennia do need to be revised. So it's not like we never will accept any change, but we want, good empirical evidence rather than philosophical and syllogistic evidence. And we just have this fear of the human being, particularly the human being on his own deciding what is right. I think I am firmly in the traditionalist and probably the nationalist and the tribalist camp, with a great fear of the human being unencumbered, the human being just deciding things on his own. Am I coming from a
That
traditionalist
that look
perspective
that
there?
that that re- that resonates with me, and that, I think about, to call attention to my memoir, the Star Chamber of Stanford. I mean, I think, if to the extent you characterize traditionalism as you just have, uh, it it is a traditionalist. The memoir is very traditionalist, at least in some of its implications. I look back, and, I'm, struggling to get, generate some publicity for myself. But so obviously I look back on on my life and think, should I have done X, Y, Z uh, differently? Maybe I couldn't have done anything other than I did, but to the extent that question is ponderable, I think to myself like, yeah, okay, maybe I upheld these highest philosophical values of being, critical and self-critical and not taking anything for granted and burrowing down to first premises, and that has its virtues and all. But I kind of psychologically I see like that made me very incompatible with my academic environment, and I think, what if I been just like a little less critical, a little more willing to just absorb ambient mores for all their flaws and arguable contradictions. Yeah, if I just like jumped in that swimming pool more wholeheartedly rather than sought to maintain, I might have ended up in a different place. So that, yeah, I mean, there's no question that that led me astray. Now the question is, I'm sort of a freaky and unusual case, but is there some? I guess the traditionalist concern would be, is there some version of this like quest for unqualified, unadulterated self-definition, which is sort of leading to the more commonplace, mundane pathologies that we see, around us. That's what would have to be shown to me. So, and I'm not saying I'm not persuadable, but let's take what is a commonly acknowledged focal point of populist conservatism. The Rust Belt, Midwestern, perhaps Appalachian, rural white person who, can no longer make a respectable living in a manufacturing job, feels alienated from the wider culture, I guess. But how do you weigh those respective aspects? And is that the result of these dangerous liberal drives you've identified to seek all meaning in the individual, or is it the result of Republican administrations uh, batting down unions or deindustrialization or what automation, uh, globalization of trade? That's the real question. How I can grant, obviously, from my own experience, the reality of the cultural, the potentially pernicious cultural forces you've identified, but how much do they actually explain as opposed to these more tangible factors?
Yeah, good question. As you're talking, I just realized it's not like liberals, conservatives in the American sense, and traditionalists are more or less pro freedom. They're just more or less pro freedom in different categories of life. So a traditionalist would be okay with people pursuing their in-group identity to the max. Like if you just want to hang out with your in-group, you just want to live with Jews or with blacks or with I don't know, Nordic Christians, like someone who's traditional shouldn't have a problem with that. So if you want to pursue in-group identity, you want to pursue exclusiveness with your tribe, the traditionalists will not have a problem with that, while people on the left will have a great deal of problem with that kind of bigotry, and conservatives will vary depending on how liberal the conservative is. On the other hand, if you want to explore sexual freedom and say take on play with transgender identity, then the left is much more open to people exploring sexual freedom. The freedom of the marketplace, the free market, then American conservatives, aka classical liberals, are okay with a maximum of freedom in the free market, both traditionalists and people on the left are much more skeptical and want to put more limits on the free market. So as I'm talking to you and thinking out loud to you, it's not like there's one spectrum in this discussion that is consistently more pro freedom than another. Is that fair?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, let's say to take these examples of traditionalist self segregation. So obviously you have certain regions. I think like Idaho, particularly, you have a lot of white conservatives moving there, feeling maybe we can sort of reconstitute some microcosm of what we think America ought to be, something which we're unable to enact, nearly anywhere else. I think you have people like Eastern Oregon, Washington, wanting to join them. So you've got other examples. You've got obviously religious schools for which religious conservatives have long sought vouchers. Yeah, you've got and obviously a lot of evangelical churches, to the extent that like so much of life's activities are subsumed within that rubric. It really kind of becomes the village, like. And it is true that people who are really on the left have a visceral dislike of that self segregation in itself. So you've had campus controversies where you couldn't religious campus groups couldn't uh refuse membership to people who didn't accept their tenets because that was exclusionary. So that's a sort of that is kind of I agree that is kind of the malice of the left, the cultural revenge of the left, not recognizing these kinds of self-segregated enclaves. But I for me, speaking more as a, let's say, a liberal rather than a leftist, it's not my objection to the self-segregation itself, so much as a certain distrust of right wingers' professed motivations. If they were really content, satisfied with that kind of self-segregation, we're going to create our own micro communities. It's just like Plymouth, the Mayflower landing in Plymouth. I wouldn't really care that much. you know I wouldn't care that they would prefer not to have people like Sephardic looking Jews like me in their midst. Like, it wouldn't bother me, but I don't trust that right wingers would really kind of restrict themselves in that manner and not seek to impose their vision on the wider society. That's for the simple reason that as you've said, traditionalists do not respect rights. It's not most fundamentally about being reasonable and respecting rights. It's certain commitment to purported timeless truths. So that's why I don't trust that, even though they may present their goals in these arguably defensible terms. I don't. So I'm self conscious about this, telling you the actual.
Okay,
Uh,
but let me jump back to my question.
okay.
My question was, is it not true that the various teams, the various philosophies we're discussing, none of them are substantially more freedom oriented than the other? They just welcome freedom in different areas and are skeptical of freedom in different areas from each other.
Okay. Well, I think this issue goes to something that I think I discussed at some length in Conservative Claims with Nietzsche and naturalism and the biological substratum of political ideology. because in the end, we are the products of these inherited impulses, as either stimulated or frustrated by culture. And depending on how we've turned out, and we can turn out in many different ways, we want a world in which that inheritance is validated. And so, yeah, insofar as like what you're saying, that everybody ultimately has some understanding of freedom, then yes, I agree that, because that's kind of the modern way of articulating our visceral sense that we are, committed to hero systems. So yes, and that's something in the book. It's just sort of in conservative claims. So there's this underlying, when you take naturalism to its logical conclusion, there's something fundamentally symmetrical between conservatives and the left, and that can be
Yeah.
articulated in terms of freedom.
Now, you used a well-worn phrase, impose their vision. It seems to me, from just the biological perspective, and then it seems to translate out into uh, human societies, is that every living thing tries to create an environment around it which is most conducive to its thriving. So I could get my political philosophy from eucalypti. Eucalypti get transported around the world, and then when they take up a little bit of space in California, they generally emit compounds that make it impossible for other living things to live
Mhm.
underneath them. They frequently outcompete native vegetation for water, and they have tremendous charms and tremendous dangers. I mean, they're filled with oil, so that if they catch a light, they can
Right.
be very dangerous. And so it's like the eucalyptus question: is the eucalypti good? Well, the eucalypti is good in some circumstances, bad in other circumstances. Will outcompete native vegetation in many circumstances. So if you are pro native vegetation, you are going to be quite skeptical of the claims of eucalypti rights. And so I would just that seems to mirror both from biology and to human societies. Does not every living thing and every human essentially want to create an environment around it that's most conducive to its hero system, its thriving?
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. And I guess the analogy is, you would have to know quite a bit of biology to see the eucalyptus tree as a danger, because sort of on its face, hey, looks great. What's the problem? If you think there's a problem, there's really a problem with you. And I guess this goes back to Amy Wax, and maybe all sorts of cultural emancipatory innovations on their face, like the eucalyptus tree. What's the problem? How can you object to them? But if you accept that human psychology, human group membership is at least as complex as trees, probably a great deal more complex, then yeah, you could say it is perfectly conceivable that you could have these exogenous exports that undermine something in, I guess, the indigenous conservative, or in the indigenous American culture, whatever you might call it. But I would, so theoretically, I can't dismiss the argument, but you've got, one can see, if you look all over the world, okay, you have plenty of societies that don't have these multicultural conflict that you find in the US and Western Europe, and yet they seem to suffer from many of the same arguable pathologies, or what conservatives see to be pathologies. So you've got low birth rates in Hungary, in Russia, societies that self-consciously disclaim what traditionalists see as these various little pathologies. but they have a lot of the same problems, and a lot of them to a greater degree in terms of low fertility rate, abortion, if you see that as a problem, divorce, uh, alcoholism, etc., etc. You have low birth rates in Korea, China, Japan. Very these ethno states, essentially. Um, so again, it's kind of, I would say, I'm not going to dismiss the conservative argument a priori, but I would draw your attention to these examples, which draw your ideology into question.
Okay, so it seems like there's a dominant type of discourse about democracy and the trajectory of democracy in the United States and the West, and that is that we are ever evolving, though occasionally taking steps back towards greater and greater human rights and human dignity. That we're constantly evolving in a good direction where we're giving, recognizing and extending rights to more and more groups. My trad critique is that you can't extend rights to one group without reducing rights to another group. So the conventional perspective on civil rights is this is wonderful. We're extending dignity and rights to all Americans. My traditional perspective is you are extending rights and dignity to some Americans while destroying rights for other Americans, such as deciding, who they want to employ, who they want to rent to, who they, want to build a community with. So my my trad perspective is that in the West today, in the United States today, you cannot extend additional rights to one group without taking away rights from another group. How do you react to that type of thinking?
Yeah, well, look, there's no question. If you have any realistic conception of human nature, you know, um, yeah, you could say certainly Southern whites who had felt, had any number of privileges over blacks for hundreds of years, even well after slavery ended. Human nature being what it is when federal power sought to impede that. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't deny that it's natural that they would feel aggrieved. I mean, if you ask me, like, well, if you had been born there, if you've been wouldn't you be the same? Can you really? Yeah, I guess I can say, you're right. I mean, you would have that feeling, and reasonable or not, from a God's eye point of view, it would be completely understandable from a human point of view, and so yeah, if you want to say, like, these liberal interventions have had human costs that were a inevitable, and b have not been fully forthrightly transparently acknowledged by liberals. I guess my answer to that is yes. That's correct, but the answer to those questions is separate from the question of, are we ultimately a better society as a result of stigmatizing and punishing what we consider to be these reprobate impulses, notwithstanding that we couldn't fault somebody for having those in those conditions. Still, so I guess we're coming back to the utilitarianism, which I invoked later. I would say overall, in the long run, yeah, you had one generation which felt maybe more than one generation that felt profoundly alienated from these interventions, which is also how they felt alienated with emancipation and defeat by the Union. I mean, maybe it's a difference of degree and flavor, but not necessarily of kind. But are we overall better in the long run after that one or two generations dies out? To that, I would answer in the affirmative.
Okay, I want to ask you, before there was transgender identity, there was gay identity, which from a traditional Jewish perspective is just unfathomable. Like, why on earth would you form your identity based on a particular sexual orientation? So, how do liberals, conservatives, and trads react to gay identity? I would assume, I mean, conservatives were much more hostile to it. Now that they're coming around, liberals were always more friendly to the idea of gay identity. But what's underneath this? Like, why is it that liberals have been much more open and friendly towards gay identity, and people on the right have been much more hostile?
Okay, well, I mean, let me start out by saying, I think you have a lot of gay people, and my instinct is to say most gay people. I can't really defend that, but certainly, there are a lot of gay people who are they're gay, but they certainly don't base their identity on their gayness. It really is, even though it sounds kind of cliche. Oh yeah, they just happen to like men. Otherwise that their identity is spread out over all sorts of things, just like it is with heterosexual people, and their gayness is just part of it. And in terms of ordinary life and ordinary interaction, they're not apart from their gayness, they're not really that different. So now there's that group of people, and I think that needs to be acknowledged, because I think traditionalist conservatives, they become infuriated by instances where that really does become the fulcrum of identity. So you have you have gay pride parades where people are performing sexual acts on each other, where there might be kids. It's certainly a public place, and yeah, I agree. Like that is seen as like liberatory, an assertion of legitimate rights. You know, in reality, the objection has nothing to do with homosexuality. I mean, we don't allow heterosexual couples to do that in public. But because it is sort of part of this broader movement of emancipation and enlightenment, it cannot be criticized on the same terms as you would, heterosexual analogs. But that is that kind of problem. And I'm just using that as an example to address the broader point. That can be achieved by just being more consistent liberals, right? Applying the same principles to everyone, even though I understand that can be problematic. I mean, what that means can be is not always so straightforward, but that you can apply that ideal. You don't have to be a traditionalist to oppose those kinds of things. Now, there is a kind of left wing impulse, this left wing secular religion, where even the secular liberal criticisms of certain expressions of gay identity, not all of them, are just seen as just reactionary. So that is a problem, but I don't think that traditionalism is the only solution.
Right, but why is it that liberalism is much more open and welcoming to gay identity, and conservatism is more skeptical of that sort of identity? Forget the type of sex. Like, people on the right accept that there are men who like men and have sex with men, but just from a right-wing perspective, basing your identity on that is astounding and bizarre, while from a conventional liberal perspective, that is welcomed and praised, because these people have been persecuted and otherized, and so we now want to welcome them into the community of dignity. Can you elaborate why liberals and conservatives have such different reactions to gay identity?
Well, because gay identity, just like transgender identity, can be, I guess, weaponized, for lack of a better term, into this ongoing hero system, this ongoing struggle to transcend and stigmatize the benightedness and parochialism of the conservative slash traditionalist culture. So it's, it's kind of, it's an fu, uh essentially. So that is why these identities, there's a liberal basis for identity, which is that, people have been similarly discriminated against, so obviously they're going to be identify with each other. So their identity is a reaction to and the beginnings of a remedy to discrimination. But if you go further left, then you're going to see that identity, it's not just sort of a pragmatic response to discrimination. It is that which is going to invalidate, debunk, stigmatize the mores of conservatives. So that's why conservatives don't like it, because the commitment is more robust than individual autonomy. I mean, they are right that they are seeking to marginalize certain mores as a sort of backwards, irrespective of whether or not they impede other people's rights.
So, out of just the legal possibilities, why are some sexual identity celebrated and other perfectly legal forms of sexual identity not celebrated? And let's just say America today. Why is it that, say, gay identity and trans identity is celebrated while a Hugh Hefner approach is perhaps less celebrated, at least in certain circles? Like, why celebrate some sexual identities and not others? And we're only talking here about legal forms of sexual expression.
Are you? I mean, can you think of an example where one identity has been upheld at the expense of another?
Well, gay
I mean,
pride, I mean, there's no hetero pride or marital sexual pride. There's not much veneration of like, say, married couples who enjoy really rigorous, sex lives with each other exclusively. Um,
mhm.
that is not a celebrated form of sexual identity. There's gay pride. There's no, straight pride, marital, hetero, straight, marital pride.
Right. I guess so. I guess so. Let me think about, so to that example. Why is there no straight pride parade? The left wing response is going to be, the left wing response is going to be, well, straight people are the dominant norm in any case. So they don't need any special exercises to uphold or exercise their pride, because their the default is just heterosexuality. So to the extent that you are seeking uh unnecessary pride, that's sort of an implicit way of disparaging the claims to equality of these marginalized groups. But I would think, maybe let's take another example. What about the example of the trad wife,
Hmm.
right? I
Hmm.
guess, who seeks to approximate these 1950s mores to various degrees, claim certain rights, but they're generally submissive to their husbands. Yeah, I mean, you're right. There is like sort of, they are certainly, they can, unlike heterosexuals writ large, um they can certainly claim a certain marginalization. I mean, there's certainly not people who are celebrated, in the media or Hollywood or advertisements, and yet they believe their vision of the good is ultimately the most fulfilling for beings such as we are. And I guess yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, they are not seen as a legitimate identity. They are characterized as grifters of various sorts. How could you advocate for these traditional gender roles when you're operating this big YouTube channel, etc. Um, so at the end of the day, I'm not discounting this conservative intuition that there is sort of a certain cultural bias towards certain identities rather than others. Obviously, I'm not one to deny the narrowness of the left, given that what I've written, but my counsel that traditionalists are saying yes, that what you're saying does exist, but that doesn't mean that all these groups don't have on the left don't have any kind of grievance whatsoever. you know I think, and that's, I guess, I'm asking, it's sort of a but ultimately, then I'm just asking traditionalists to be good Christians, right? I'm just asking them to turn the other cheek. I'm saying, yes, you are being sort of insulted by these groups in the core of your identities, but I'm still saying you still want to be kind of fair minded, and which I guess is the meaning of turning the other cheek. And yes, there are these affronts to you, but recognize that these other groups have in various contexts been aggrieved as well. So I mean, I'm not a Christian. I don't know that I would turn the other cheek, but insofar as people subscribe to that, then I can certainly recommend it to them.
There's a great line in your book where you quote Peter Berger. He says, "It is still natural to become a Catholic priest in Rome in a way that it is not in America." And so that that line has stuck with me and has helped me approach and understand Christian nationalism in the sense that many people who would be tagged as Christian nationalists and may even identify that way themselves, they probably have the same basic impulses of tens of millions of Americans 50 years previous, but in a different cultural milieu, they felt no
Mhm.
need to identify as Christian nationalists. But
Because there's the
now,
unstated background, yeah.
yeah, now that the background has changed, like if you are swimming and the current that you're swimming against goes from 1 mile an hour to 5 mile an hour, you have to swim 5 times as hard to just stay even. And so I would expect that millions of American Christians, or those who just feel some kind of kinship with Christianity, they feel the current in wider society flowing against them in a way that I would presume that Americans in the 1950s did not. And so they have to compensate to just try to stay even, and their compensation is now called Christian nationalism, which in one sense seems completely radical and out of step with the main direction of Christianity in this country for 230 years. But the environment that these people are swimming in has completely changed, and it's become understandable now that what we call Christian nationalists, and it's called a scary thing. It's a
Mm.
reaction to this tide that we're swimming in, which is increasingly flowing against, say, public displays of Christianity. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, so you've got this Christian nationalism, you've got this critique of it, which you'll find, both by liberals and like the never Trumper conservatives, like David French, Tim Alberta. They say it is a perversion of real Christianity, the idolatry of religious values in secular form, the idolatry of Donald Trump, and people have observed that many people who are Christian nationalists. These are not people who are spending a lot of their time really poring over the Bible or going to church or meditating. That it's really become much more of a cultural identity. Jesus has become kind of this Rambo figure. He's the muscular Jesus superseding the outdated sissy Jesus who turns the other cheek. So with you've got crosses being replaced by swords. Some have said, I don't know whether that's the case. So that's kind of the liberal critique, and I think maybe your question is, well, uh, maybe there is all of this unseemliness, which was sort of much less overt, understated in the traditional dispensation, and things that we don't like. But is it your question? Is it understandable, not be given the ever increasing cultural inroads made by this kind of elite culture? And on when I think about the book, I think I have to agree that yes, that's correct, because at the end of the day, I examine all manner of things from theistic belief, religious neutrality, to all sorts of seemingly disconnected things. And I in the book, I think to conceptualize the entire all these culture wars, whatever the ostensible issue is, as this conflict of the buffered self and the porous self. So in the end, yes, I mean, I guess I would have to see what's going on with Christian nationalism as simply kind of, I guess, the latest iteration of this pre-modern versus modern conflict, which can manifest itself in all sorts of ways, but which is always they're running underneath. Uh, so yeah, I mean that's again sort of I talk about a lot about the rhetorical disadvantages under which conservatives labor. And I guess the idea, the phenomenon of Christian nationalism is perhaps an illustration of that, because certainly on the surface, at least, there certainly is a conflict between who they are and how they live, and a lot of traditional understandings of Christianity. Most importantly, the division between secular power and religious or eternal power, the city of man, the city of God. So and so liberals can pounce on those hypocrisies. It really is a kind of paganism. It's the golden calf in some ways, but you could say, given that they are porous selves operating under these particular conditions, well, that that makes sense, right? They are they have a pre-modern understanding of themselves, and so yeah, where are you coming from does make sense.
So I'm wondering if there are people who have absorbed this modern, buffered, secular, liberal perspective on life, and they just don't feel alive. And in their soul, they just want to feel alive. And they may try to reach this through certain forms of extreme sexuality. But I think for millions of Americans, they are tired of not feeling alive, or for millions of people around the world, they're tired of not feeling alive in the conventional, dominant, liberal worldview. And so they are drawn to strong in-group identities, be they racial in-group identities, religious in-group identities. So they're becoming trad wives. They're joining Hamas. They're becoming racial nationalists. They're becoming Christian nationalists. This buffered identity just lacks excitement, I think, for millions of people, and so they start finding that other forms of living that that have a strong in-group identity, either as a trad wife or as a member of Hamas, makes them feel alive. I think a lot of people want to feel alive, and the buffered identity does not enable them to feel alive. What do you think?
Right. It is. Well, that's the internal contradiction of the buffered identity. It is a hero system, but it's a hero system that purports to be the transcendence of all hero system. So this kind of genuinely self critical and socially critical attitudes. Does it can it offer a certain satisfaction? To some people. Certainly, I guess it does. It does for me. I mean, it's my I guess it's my primary form of satisfaction for whatever it's worth. But certainly, most people, for most people, it's not a necessity. And yeah, they want a certain invigoration. They want feeling alive. They want their dopamine to be higher. They want their serotonin to be higher, and everything you've described is a way of doing that. And yeah, I mean, you can't. You can say, can you really, blame these sort of advanced primates, such as they are, for turning on their critical faculties for the sake of something which is just like more essential than being truthful, more essential than being in the right. Um, I mean, how can you fault that? That's asking to fault that is essentially to I guess to ask an animal, a mortal animal, to rise to become a god. And you can see how there are impulses in our cultural heritage which would promote that. We also see why it is foolish. So yeah, I'm sort of that's why I'm not an intensely moralistic person. That's why, even though I've said I'm center left, if I see conservatives or traditionalists on TV, I don't, even though it's completely foreign, completely alien, I don't become infuriated, because I understand human nature. My own impulses are rather unusual, so that gives me a sort of a perspective to see the default for what it is, and to see the continuities between otherwise different groups for what they are. And I would like to promote that sort of tolerance, but there are reasons why most people of any persuasion are not predisposed towards it.
Why do you think nudist hasn't become a celebrated sexual identity?
A nudist?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything about uh nudists. I mean, I don't know when the movement started. I assume it's rather long standing. I assume it maybe received a new impetus in the 60s and 70s as a return to nature and natural authenticity. But it seems like there it's not really an issue. Like, everybody agrees that in society you obey the law, but if they want to go to their own beaches, their own resorts, somewhere they can do what they want, right? And no one really cares. And they've accepted that society rejects nudism, and the larger society has accepted they can within their enclaves do whatever they want. And it's pretty laissez aller, right? Pretty live and let live, I guess.
But it's not celebrated like gay identity.
It's not yeah, and it's like, because I never thought of nudism as an identity, in the sense that I never thought of it as kind of a call for a certain sort of recognition. I mean, I just like these people. They feel more natural, for whatever reason, in whatever way, being nude and being around other nude people. It's them being nude with other people. It's like being like getting in a warm bath. It just feels good. So I don't know that nudists. Again, I don't know much about the movement, so I could be totally wrong. But the very fact that they're not in the nude would indicate that they're not really sort of an identity group seeking recognition. They simply, you know, prefer being nude where they can be nude, and they've like compromised with society accordingly. And there's no, they're not in the news because there's no conflict given what they want. I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. New York Times in 1994, between basically 1994 and 2023, it mentioned polyamory once, one article per year. Then in 2023, there were a record 27 articles about polyamory. And in 2024, the New York Times is on pace for 66 articles about polyamory. It's received exhaustive treatment in New York Magazine. So much of our elite media is now doing articles about polyamory. Do you have any thoughts why this has become so hot?
I mean, I haven't really thought much about polyamory. I mean, the disparities you've highlighted are certainly there, for a reason. I mean, is it going to be, is the polyamorous lifestyle going to be hardest towards, some end? I'm not really, I guess I'm not completely clear what polyamory is. Does it mean they make
It can
uh
mean anything.
no-
That's why it's so cool, right? It's anything that you're into. If you want to have multiple women, that's polyamory. If you're a woman who enjoys two men fighting for you, that's polyamory. If it's so elastic that I think
so
that's
I mean, isn't it then just like, to the extent that it's that elastic, I mean, isn't it just like a sort of a glamorized term for having some kind of fetish, for lack of a better term, outside of just like straight, monogamous, heterosexual intercourse? I mean, I guess, and I guess and if you're into something else, then doing that instead. So I think, like, if that's what polyamory, if it's that flexible and elastic, I mean, why not just call that, freedom? Like, I guess it's one more instance. To the extent that polyamory then becomes an identity, isn't it just like it's like one more example of people turning what should just be an unglamorized, fine, you're free to do what you want, a baseline, unglamorized, taken for granted commitment to human freedom becomes fetishized and glamorized into some sort of transgressive identity. I guess that's what it is. Maybe it sounds like going on. Instead of, I mean, you could say, people are like, kind of couples are experimenting, or you could put it in that way. But I guess it's being framed in terms of a new identity that demands recognition. Is that what you are thinking is going
well,
on?
it seems to be the hot new thing in elite media circles, and I'm not claiming that the coverage is universally fawning or praising or saying we need to recognize this and honor and accord it dignity. It's just a hot topic of conversation, and it's certainly not in a condemning way from the New York Times and then on
Right.
down from the major media. There's just been an explosion in it. And I don't think you would have this understanding, empathetic coverage of polyamory if it was primarily Mormons in Utah, men having multiple wives. So, so from a tribal and nationalist perspective, I would want a crackdown on men having multiple wives in Utah because I would be afraid that it would pull on the delicate fabric of society that we need to discipline men to just be with one woman, and so just the very existence of above ground families with one husband and multiple wives flourishing in Utah as a trad and as a nationalist, I would regard that as a threat to the family fabric of my society. Now, as a libertarian, if I were a libertarian, then of course I wouldn't have a problem with it. But if you're a liberal left, you would think it's exploitive of women, and if you're a conservative, you would have concerns that it's pulling on the fabric of society. How would you view the different political philosophies reacting to, let's say, widespread above ground, though short of legal, one man with multiple wives going on in Utah?
So, I think that certainly, I think that the conservative point, the general point, is well taken. That, like, yeah, historically enforced monogamy is much better than social than polygamy based on whatever power the very upper crust happens to have. That's not. I guess that's a conservative intuition,
Yeah,
but it's also a certain kind of an egalitarian intuition as well. That sort of, to have a functioning society, you need to have a certain degree of egalitarianism as well, of which enforced monogamy is one is one expression. But I guess I would say to conservatives who are suspicious of redistributionist schemes. I know that today, obviously, Utah, as a condition of joining the union, had to renounce polygamy, and that has since been renounced by the mainstream Mormon Church. Even though you have certain, like, I guess, outliers, maybe outlying cults there in Utah or Nevada that are still committed to traditional Mormon polygamy. But it seems like, to the extent that you want this socially stabilizing monogamy, the threat to that is not really, these outlying cults in traditional Mormon cults out in the deserts of Utah, or molesting minors or whatever they're doing. It's economic inequality between different males, right? Because if we assume women want are hypergamous, they want at least their own to mate with someone who is at least their social status and preferably higher. Well, that is in itself a threat to monogamy. And then if you have a society, a neoliberal or a libertarian society, which attaches little importance to inequality. So I think that, like, the primary threat to traditionalist values. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no threat from the culturally avant-garde left, but I'm not sure how substantial that threat is, as compared to the inequalities created by capitalism.
Okay, I'm going to pivot to Israel Hamas Gaza
Sure.
conflict, and one of the arguments I hear from the pro-Israel crowd, you cannot give Palestinians a state now because you'd be rewarding them for bad behavior. And as someone with some acquaintance of history, I recognize that almost all states have been created through the use of violence. That if the Palestinians happen to get a state of their own as a result of the October 7 attacks, they would be, right along with a large number of states as a result of killing people. That's why they got
Yeah.
their state. So from philosophical first principles, you don't want to reward people for bad behavior, but empirically, this is what happens all the time in history. So it's another conflict between philosophical first principles and empirical reality, which has been an undercurrent in our discussion today. Any thoughts on this type of thinking?
Yeah, well, I've always been and I continue to be in favor of a Palestinian state. I there's this idea that you hear among, I guess, the Hasbara, right? It's just like, yeah, the Palestinians are essentially, insane. They've been overtaken by these, be it anti-Semitic or fundamentalist or whatever you call them, impulses, and we have to hit back because their underlying impetus is irrational, and therefore any attempt at compromise will simply encourage the underlying irrational fire, the irrational rage. That's what you hear all the time. But I mean, the reality is that if you look at Israel's founders, and in fact, many important government and military leaders throughout Israeli history, they've all acknowledged that the Palestinians are not crazy. In 1956, Moshe Dayan went to a memorial service for security guards who had been killed near Gaza by someone who had crossed over Gaza. And he said, of course we have to defend our land, but let's not seethe in rage against the person who crossed over. Put yourself in their place. They used to live on this side of the border. They're now crowded into this strip. It's completely natural they respond in the same way. Ben Gurion, same. He said similar things. Ehud Barak said, "Well, what if you'd been born a Palestinian? Where would you end up?" And he said, "I would have joined Hamas." So this idea that there is this madness on the Palestinian side has been rejected by Israel's own founding fathers. Um, and I recognize that, yes, certainly, I'm not denying that there's this Islamist fundamentalism is real, and that there certainly exist people who will, until the end of their days, seek to eliminate Israel, irrespective of whatever compromises it offers. You know, those people exist, but I don't think it's the average Palestinian who just wants to have a normal life. And the proof of that is, if you look at the Israeli Palestinians, the Israeli Arabs. There have been points of tension between them and Jewish Israelis, but overall, even though they're aggrieved in various ways, they're not fanatics. They're just trying to, build families, build businesses, etc., etc. They're just sort of normal people. So obviously, this kind of background idea that there's something in the Palestinian culture which is going to like push them into ever greater conflict, irrespective of what compromises you make, is refuted by that example, because you see they've been treated differently, notwithstanding various forms of discrimination and so forth. They have real lives, and so they're not given to that fanaticism. So that's I kind of I reject this kind of Sam Harris and others. It's just like the perennial manifestation of uh, of Islam or Arabism or what have you. The Israeli Arabs show that compromise is possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't agree with the uh, Hasbara pro-Israel line that there's just something inherently fanatical, delusional, violent, bloodthirsty about Palestinians. That they, like everyone else, are a product of their genetics, their history, and the context in which they're operating. And life in Gaza has been pretty brutal, in large part because of Israeli choices, but in large part because of Egyptian choices, and then a combination with the Gazan choices. So this combination has created an absolutely brutal life for them there. Uh, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I think a ceasefire is definitely warranted. The idea that sort of if you stop now, they'll simply being encouraged. Again, I think this is not something which they will forget. And again, it's just October 7th happened because of the incompetence of the Israeli government, not because Hamas was so powerful. They weren't the Wehrmacht in 1940 or whatever. So, but again, so it's the Israeli military establishment. They're transferring. They're trying to expiate their guilt through this response, even though there's no reason why it needs to be carried any further.
Okay, Sam Bankman-Fried, and to a lesser degree his parents, were major news items for, what was it, 9 months. And then Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted a few months ago, and there's virtually no news interest in Sam Bankman-Fried anymore. Was there anything that you found interesting about that trajectory that's essentially culminated with him going to prison for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be sentenced. I think it's scheduled in this month now, in March, his sentencing. And I mean, I think, I mean, he had another trial. I don't know if that's been called off by the feds. But yeah, it's very tragic. But I mean, but he's certainly guilty. I don't think there's any dispute about that. I mean, there has to have been a conscious decision to appropriate client funds. That's not the result of like misjudgment or miscalculation or negligence. That requires a conscious decision. So I have um no doubts as to his guilt. Is he a nefarious person rather than a weak person, marred by insecurity, flaws and insecurities like everyone? Yeah, if he's the latter. I don't think he's like a nefarious character. I think it's probably a lot of kind of like innocent flaws, understandable human flaws that, under the circumstances at hand, led to his downfall. Kind of like how I see, my downfall at the hands of his parents. But legally speaking, clearly guilty. There have been no criminal charges filed against the parents, but the bankruptcy estate has filed suit to claw back a lot of assets, including an apartment in the Caribbean, lots of cash, money donated to Stanford, things like that. So they're in they're not in great shape. I mean, you know, they maybe their financial downfall fighting this lawsuit and paying for their son's legal bills and appeals and so forth. I mean, I mean, they're well off. They're Stanford law professors, but not Silicon Valley, billionaires by any means. So they have suffered, and as might be expected. Of course, I seek to see their fate as an outcome of the pathologies that I identified in my memoir. That's just natural. Obviously, I'm gonna see things in those terms. But no, I will certainly be following their story. They're certainly flawed, but very interesting human beings. I don't think they're evil either. But they express our cultural situation.
Do you think that this ordeal has modified their worldviews in any way? Meaning the
You,
parents.
I remember. So my third year of law school, I had the legal theory seminar with Bankman, Barbara's husband, and Joe Kramer, or Dean Kramer, Larry Kramer, the dean. So, and I remember, I think our very first classroom assignment um, was Martha Nussbaum. I think it was analysis of Aristotle's assertion, call or dictum, I get dictate, call no man happy until he is dead. And that's Nussbaum sort of elaborated that in terms of the idea of moral luck, how ultimately our sense of moral worth, or any kind of worth, I guess, really is a function of our broader narrative of how things pan out, not our intentions. And so our presence is always held hostage to the future, which can you know pan out in a way that completely discredits our entire understanding of what our life has been about. So that was, I remember Barbara was leading that discussion. I think Josh Cohen was involved as well. I know she was very intently into that topic and the question of moral luck and how randomness, things that are not intended, things that can't be controlled or predicted, uh, play out into who we are, even though all of our both Christian and enlightened moral principles tells us maybe they shouldn't. And so I think about this thing with what happened with her son is kind of the ultimate social vindication of Aristotle's recommendation called "No man happy until he was dead," highlighted Barbara in the first session or two of that class, and I think that certainly applies to Joe and Barbara themselves. You know, I don't know how exactly things are going to pan out. Um, Certainly not the way they thought it would pan out about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You know, I remember maybe like a few months before everything collapsed with FTX, just seeing some YouTube interview of Sam Bankman-Fried, big billionaire. It was right around the time I was like, self-publishing the memoir on Amazon. And obviously I'm sort of, worried about how it's going to do and insecure and so forth. And like, I see like spawn of my nemesis, he's all out there on top of the world. But what 6 months later, he's got nothing. I'm richer than he is now, maybe.
And his parents
Uh,
went through hell.
well, yeah, I mean, putting his brother through hell. He had to sell his. He had some sort of anti-COVID public health foundation. Had to sell his I think he has a DC place that might be sought after. Yeah, his parents, maybe they won't have their home. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, a stand-up wrestler makes a lot of money, but still, it's not that much. Um, yeah, I mean, the humiliation to force that kind of to upend your parents' like entire self understanding and self conception in a matter of weeks. You know, something that they could not have imagined. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
one more question? What role does caffeine play in your life?
caffeine. Yeah, I drink. Wake up in the morning. I have caffeine. Then typically at work, I'll make 1 cup of coffee. I used to make two, morning and afternoon. Now, actually, I make do with one. Make it in the morning and sort of sip it throughout the day. So,
So like
not super
two
high,
cups a
but
day, 2 cups a
what's that?
day, 2 cups of coffee a day.
Yeah, I think that's pretty average. Yeah,
Okay, and what about stimulants like Adderall or modafinil or any nootropics that you take?
nothing like that.
Okay, just checking. All right. Any final words for today?
Um, I think we've done good. Yeah, we've covered ground that I wasn't necessarily expecting to, but I think we've drawn a coherent picture, whatever that is.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ronnie. Great to talk to you again, man.
Okay,
Take
look,
care.
great. Thanks. We'll do it again. Thanks.
Okay, yep. Take care. Okay,
Bye bye.
I'm gonna proceed on with the solo stream for a little while. I want to go to my email, and there's an email here from Kemedov. It says, I recall you mentioning that having been raised as a Protestant, the dualistic morality, which a sharp distinction is drawn between the standards that apply to how you treat members of one's in-group and the standards that apply to all others, was foreign to you when you first encountered it. Also recall you mentioning the particularly strong anti-Catholic sentiment that you recall from your Protestant upbringing. Do you find any contradiction between the two? Was the latter an exception to the former, or is there perhaps a different way of understanding it, a way of reconciling the two, or even an understanding them in a way that could be viewed as consistent? Yes. So I grew up among Protestants who believed in universal morality. So even though many of them hated Catholics, there was no publicly stated sense that it was okay to rip off Catholics or to mistreat Catholics. Now, there may have been a desire for a reservation of privileges to Catholics, right? There may be certainly there was in Protestant countries for centuries an understanding that Catholics were an outgroup who threatened the conservative the Protestant approach to the Protestant hero system. So I think one can have a belief in universal morality and still dislike outgroups. But when you're with people who believe in universal morality, you can loathe outgroups, be they gays, Jews, Catholics, but there's no sense that I heard that it's okay to rip them off in business. There's no sense that it's okay to beat them up. There's no sense that it's okay to mistreat them. There may be a sense, certainly at a different time period, where it's okay to withhold privileges from them. So you don't necessarily give them the vote. You don't necessarily admit them to Oxford and Cambridge. You don't necessarily vote them into public office, right? So I think you can have universal morality, still hate outgroups, and not want to extend certain privileges that you want to keep just to your in-group. You don't. That doesn't mean that you want to extend those same privileges to all outgroups just because you believe in universal morality. But it does mean a clarity that it's not okay to deliberately do harm towards outgroups just because they're outgroups, as opposed to withholding certain privileges that you simply want to extend to your in-group. So that's clear to me. I don't know if it's clear to anybody else. And let me play a little bit from Decoding the Gurus, right? This is where they rag on live streamers.
It's not directly related to the gurus here, but actually, I'm thinking we should do a season on streamers, because streamers are just such a weird collection of people. They're almost distilled gururosity in a way, because they're all about cultivating parasocial relationships through their incredibly long streams, right?
Yeah.
Where they just sit and waffle shit to hundreds of people or thousands of people who are looking up them. I mean, we do that too, but the difference is it's asynchronous. It's like a radio. It's a modern form of radio. We don't get the love back just in the reviews. And there, people are more often than likely kicking the piss.
Yeah, so I've never watched a stream. I've never watched one of these, Chris. Not once. But I do know that there are lots of people like typing all the time, and they're interacting with their audience. They're doing like a stream of consciousness thing, aren't they? Like they're just talking about whatever occurs to them as they play the game. Is that correct?
Yes, this is correct. So there's a little thing I'd like to play for you. I'll provide the context. There is this leftist streamer called Vaush, and he got caught while streaming. He opened up his to be sorted folder, right? And in that to be sorted folder was various like porn stuff, right? Not a good thing. Got to be careful when you're live streaming your content.
Happens to the best of us, Chris. Happens to the best of us.
But what usually doesn't occur is that folder includes a substantial amount or even any number of lolicon style porn, like Lolita anime, young presenting girls porn, and
anime.
Yes, it was anime, I believe. And but the other one was horse porn, and I believe there were some crossovers. Like it might have been lolly horse porn. It's
Wait,
your life.
You're talking about an underage horse. Wait, who's doing?
No, sadly not. That would be, in some ways, maybe it's not bad or worse. I'm not actually sure, but in any case, I think there were some crossovers. Maybe it was two separate things. I don't know, but in any case, it's probably not what you want to flash. But his defense was pretty good. One of the defenses was like he just kind of argued that it was known that he's into horse porn because yes, he wants to imagine himself as a powerful stallion.
It's literally a joke, man. The horse thing is not a joke. We can't let this be smeared, okay? If to whatever extent, people can say, oh, he plays it off as this or that, okay? I'll make it clear. You can write this down. I want to fuck a woman as a horse. None of this is a secret. To be clear, many jokes have been made about this, but I stand by it. My moral principles are rock solid. My feet are firmly planted.
So I'm not exactly sure why I'm playing this. I don't think I have particularly profound commentary. Is there like a class distinction here between academics who record podcasts and look down on live streamers, and the most successful live streamers essentially blurt out everything that just comes to their mind? And so they are much more vulnerable and much more open, as opposed to the more buffered identity of the conventional academic who will record his podcast and he'll be careful to keep his porn viewing habits separate from his live streaming. So is this a social class critique that's going on here?
Planted in the ground. I've got my boots up. They're planted firmly. You cannot move me from my position. This isn't a secret. Let's talk to a therapist. Well, why do you want to be the horse, Vaush? Because then I'd have a giant dick. Okay, couldn't you have a big dick the other way? Well, yeah, I could. I could have a big dick hypothetically in any variety of scenarios, but then it wouldn't really be a horse dick. Well, you could be a human with a horse dick. Yes, but then I wouldn't have that powerful stallion energy using it. There you go. That's it.
Right. I guess the point I want to make is that we are driven by all sorts of things that don't necessarily make much rational sense, and that reason is a really weak reed to rely on. All right. We are primarily driven by our genetics and our imprinting and by what our in-group rewards.
That's the whole thing.
Like
that seems reasonable. I mean,
yeah. So this is that was his first defense.
Okay.
So I think to behold. But his second defense is the one that I really want to focus on, because the second one is the bigger problem, right? The kind of lolly content. So how was he going to explain that? And this is just, it's such a unique defense that I think few people would have anticipated this.
The other one is like a threesome with two chicks and a guy. And in retrospect, looking at it, knowing now that that artist is a lolicon, yeah, I can see it. When I looked at it, I think the vibe that I got was like short stack, thick kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like the way like goblins get drawn in porn. You'll have to entertain me for a moment on this presumed shared knowledge of how goblins get drawn in pornography. But you know how they're all like thick short stacks, right?
He should not presume there is a shared knowledge of goblin porn, at least not in my case, Chris.
Thick short stacks. Apparently short stack is the lingo for midget porn. So that's the PC term for that particular genre. But goblin short stack. But it's a bold defense. You know, you've got me all wrong, copper.
I didn't know it was lolicon. I thought it was midget trolls. Goblins.
Yeah, it's so good. So that's just a taste of the streaming world, right? There's more to come in the coming weeks as we might dive in there. But yeah, so we do have a decoding episode today, Matt.
Okay, I don't know exactly why I played that, but it caught my
Vaush
attention.
is the third largest left-leaning political streamer. He views himself as an intellectual mastermind.
My moral principles are rock solid. I feel like I've outpaced him intellectually.
He sexually harassed a girl and then said she doesn't even deserve basic human rights.
Poppy is not worth apologizing to. She is barely worth the intrinsic human rights to which all human beings are endowed, okay? She is a disgusting human being. And that doesn't mean what I did wasn't wrong. It does mean I will never apologize to her.
Or outright rewriting history so he could accuse his critics of the most horrible things.
When he was doing his, like, apologia arc and, like, laughing and saying that, like, a woman who was a retarded child.
He thinks he's so smart that he actively tries to justify for CP, just for fun.
It is possible for an adult and a child to have a sexual relationship and for it to have positive outcomes on the child as well.
Pedophiles, right, who buy child pornography, would you say they should not be held responsible for doing that?
Yes. I would not say that it is unethical for a person to purchase child pornography.
Making fun of Asmund for watching the pedo show Dragon Maid.
Dragon Maid, king of pedophile animes. I'm not watching this shit.
While accidentally leaking his lolly folder.
This is an example of the kind of structure that I'm referring to.
And having his girlfriend draw the exact same childish anime character, with eyes rolled into the back of her head, mouth open, blushing. In his folder is a character that is 12 years old, as well as other young depictions of girls sucking horse wieners. Vaush wants to be a horse, by the way.
I'll make it clear. You can write this down. I want to fuck a woman as a horse. None of this is a secret. To be clear, you know, many jokes have been made about this, but I stand by it. My moral principles are rock solid. My feet are firmly planted in the ground.
Since this has all been exposed, Vaush has been posting about Midna, the childish girl from Zelda, saying she's hot, asking people in Discord if they've ever abused a minor, and then saying hot when someone says they were a victim. This is a journey into the deepest, darkest corners of hypocrisy, dishonesty, and degeneracy. This is Vaush.
Why do you want to be the horse, Vaush? Because then I'd have a giant dick. Okay, couldn't you have a big dick the other way? Well, yeah, I could. Like, yeah, I could have a big dick hypothetically in any variety of scenarios, but then it wouldn't really be a horse dick. Well, you could be a human with a horse dick, yes, but then I wouldn't have that power.
Okay, I don't think I have anything too profound, but what makes a live streamer compelling is that they share almost everything that's going through their head. And when you do this for many hours a week, all right, there are very likely to be all sorts of distasteful things that are revealed. Okay, a little bit more highbrow here from Decoding the Gurus. This is excellent. They take down the philosopher, John Gray, who I quite like a lot of his work. So that's why I appreciate Decoding the Gurus taking him down, because they kind of alerted me to something that I hadn't thought of as clearly as they have.
With Matt, the psychologist, and people, academics, perhaps in general, are a little bit prone to, but I find a rather egregious example of it in content recently, so I wanted to highlight. So this is a mini-decoding, but a specific guru-ish technique.
Understood.
Right, this added something to my mental repertoire, my intellectual repertoire, to my decoding the world around me. I've encountered the problem that they're going to critique here countless times. I have on my own show weighed out different ways to approach it, but I don't allow that much indulgent monologuing by my guests.
I haven't heard this yet.
No, you haven't. You have not. And it's from a recent podcast with Sam Harris. Now, it's not focusing on Sam Harris, okay? We've already had enough talking about Sam recently. This is not about Sam. It's something that his guest does. And his guest in this instance is a philosopher called, what's his name? How did a second ago?
He was a favorite
John
philosopher,
Gray. And
Margaret
it's from
Thatcher.
a recent episode called Is Moral Progress a Fantasy? Again, this is...
So Kevin Michael Grace was a big fan of John Gray. We had one of his books, I think, The 7 Types of Atheism, on our book club. I think he was either a favorite of Margaret Thatcher or he was renowned as that rare intellectual who said some positive things about Margaret Thatcher.
It's not important, the kind of topic of that.
Mm-hmm. We're not hugely invested in this issue of is moral progress possible?
No, you would think it is, but nonetheless, John Gray might have some arguments against that. But let's set aside the philosophers' tendencies. I don't know how to put it, what they like to do, arguing things that seem like you should be able to argue them. But at the end of that episode, there is a segment where they address the issue of new atheism and atheism in general, because apparently John Gray was quite a strong critic of the new atheists, right? Which includes Sam. So Sam invites him at the end, maybe what would you raise as your criticisms about atheism, new atheism? And it's his response where we get to see the technique that we're looking at today. So why don't I play the start of the response and then I'll stop it and we can see if you pick up on what I'm getting at. Okay?
Okay. All right. Let's go.
So here we go.
I think we should close on atheism and in particular your criticism of new atheism. And I guess I'll just put it to you. What is it that you think we got wrong about religion?
Oh, well, a number of things. One is that religion isn't just or even primarily an intellectual error. I mean, if you approach the human animal in the spirit of scientific impartiality, you would observe that however religion is defined, it's not perhaps ubiquitous in every human being, but it's nearly universal in human culture. So if you started with that assumption, you might...
Okay, so that's a good answer to the question. But does he end there? No, he does not.
I think it served some needs, human needs, or had some kind of functions in human life, quite apart from whether or not it involved intellectual mistakes and or errors. So the first thing is a kind of intellectualist or rationalist theory of why religion is wrong. And of course, I've been rather caustic about that in some of my writings, because what I observe as an historian of ideas is that...
Okay, so a little excessively self-referential.
People...
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So starting off, I think that's generally okay.
Yeah, that sounded okay to me. That sounded cogent, made sense to me. He's saying, look...
Yeah.
He's saying, look, my issue is that religion is ubiquitous. It probably does fulfill some kind of functions, and it's maybe limiting to understand it purely in terms of it being intellectually fallacious or not.
Yes, that's and no issue so far. Okay, that was a reasonable point to raise. That this is one of my objections of the new atheists, but it continues.
Who believed they'd shed every last vestige of religious belief. I'm not speaking of you or even of other new atheists, but those who became dialectical materialists or Marxist-Leninists or even scientific racists, for example. Many of them were atheists. They thought they'd but what they hadn't removed in themselves was a need for some kind of worldview or belief which sustained their sense of value and importance in the universe, which, of course, is one of the things that religions do. And, of course, we have to bear in mind here that whatever the meaning of the word religion, I don't think dictionaries, Pinker often uses dictionary, I don't think they're that useful here, but whatever it means, it includes more than monotheism, because there have been countless religions in the world, Greek.
Right, as though we didn't know that religion includes more than monotheism.
Ancient Greek religion, Chinese religion, Indian religion, most of the religions in the world, including what may be the primordial human religion, animism, have not...
Remember, he was asked, what's your critique of the new atheists? And then he just waffles and monologues and just goes on and doesn't answer the question. So as a good host, you got to interrupt people, even eminent philosophers like John Gray, when they start going on and on.
Which probably all human and pre-human, early human and pre-human cultures sustained was the idea that the world is full of spirits. And the idea that, for example, one of the unexamined distinctions that is...
Right, so a big difference between the traditional conception of life and the modern conception of life is the traditional conception of life believed that God and the divine and spirits and devils and angels were all around us. And that if there was an earthquake, for example, that was, God's intervention into the world.
Often invoked by scientific, between natural and supernatural explanation, but that only really arises if you have a monotheistic or some similar idea of creation. If you think as the ancient Greeks did, or the
Let's take a pause here. So
take a little break. Yeah.
So what did you pick up there? The next, he's kind of layered on a bit more, right?
He has, and it's easy to forget what the original question was. Hey, so Sam asked him, "What's your problem with the new atheist take on religion?" Right? He started off okay in that first section, but now he's talking about that religions, there's lots of differences, not just monotheism. It all goes back to animism.
So John Gray, 76, but people who are 16 and 26 will often repeat themselves over and over. And as I've gotten older, I've got more and more impatient. Like with friends, with family, if they've said something to me 50 times, 100 times, 200 times, I stop them now. I say, look, you've already said that 100 times. I already know that you think it's absurd that Americans call their baseball final the World Series when it only contains teams from the United States and Canada. I know that you think it's absurd that Americans call the Super Bowl the World Championship when it only contains teams from America. Yeah, you've made that point to me 200 times. All right, I don't need it again.
And only the monotheistic ones had a distinction between the natural and the supernatural. What else did he say?
Well, he also pointed out that there have been secular regimes which have been quite brutal, and he implied.
And so, speaking of absurd, we've got Claire Core in the chat saying there are no moral and political philosophers worth their salt in the West. And Claire, by the way, how many works of philosophy, how many books of philosophy have you read in the past year? If I remember correctly, you don't read books. So you have absolutely no problem making sweeping statements about things you know absolutely nothing about. And you may think, oh, this is the internet, this is just what people do. There are very bad consequences to people who are constantly making very confident and sweeping pronouncements about things they know absolutely nothing about, right? It means that you're completely removed from reality, that you have a delusional sense of your own ability to understand what's going on in the world around you. And that does not lead to happy directions.
Like that, they were still searching, like they needed to fill the gap of religion, so the Marxists and the Nazis and...
Yeah. Well, he pointed out that some of the new atheists, anyway, came to be known to hold unsavory opinions, and And
scientific racism.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's a ding against them in his mind. But yeah, it's all a bit tangential, isn't it? None of it is really addressing the question yet.
Yeah. So, I mean, do we just give people permission to bore us to death or to say things over and over and over again? And there is a time and a place for deference, but I don't have much deference in me. I don't usually put up with this. Like, if it's not a boss, right? If it's not an important client, I don't put up with it. I will walk out. I will leave boring dinner parties. I won't permit people to say the same things over and over again. I will interrupt their monologues. I guess it's a really important value to me to not be held hostage by other people's blathering. Right? I put up with it a little bit, right? If you're going to host a show and you're going to have guests, right? Some of those guests are going to blather to more or less degrees, and I deliberately, put up with a certain amount of blathering because I know that the guests will also say unexpected things that I wouldn't have come up with. So I try to weigh it up, but to the best of my ability, I try to cut off blathering in my real life, in my odd life. I don't like it, and I try to stop it.
It might be building their point. So
I guess I'm becoming more assertive. Like when I walk down the road, and often there are people who just take up the whole sidewalk, right? I no longer walk into the grass around them. I say, excuse me, if their dog is in my way, right? And I might trip over their dog. I say, excuse me, if their child is in my way. I say, excuse me, if their bicycle is in my way. I say, excuse me. And 100% of the time they move their dog, they move their child 100% of the time. So am I becoming a little bit more assertive in my old age, a little less patient?
Let's continue.
Congolese pygmies and the Aztecs did, and so on, that the universe was more or less everlasting, but there were various gods that appeared in it, and that the world was, if you thought that the natural world was full of gods, full of spirits, you wouldn't make this distinction between.
Okay, so Claire Core announces in the chat, no one has been able to identify anything I have claimed that is untrue or illogical. Okay, what do you think is the real life trajectory for people who are so completely removed from reality? I don't think it's a good one, right? I just, from what I've seen in my life, people go through an immense amount of humiliation and isolation when they are as removed from reality as Claire Core consistently displays. Now, maybe she's the exception to the rule. Who knows?
Natural and supernatural, you would just look at things without making that. It's an artifact. No, much of what passes for atheism is an artifact of monotheism, in that although the beliefs are negated or reversed or turned upside down or rejected or refused, repudiated, the conceptual framework is still there. And you can get out of that conceptual framework if you try and inhabit the conceptual framework of ancient Greek religion or ancient Indian religion or ancient Chinese religion or Aztec religion. Of course, in all of them, you'll find interesting feature, which is that the gods are normally plural, although in Indian religion, they're sometimes said to be aspects of a single impersonal god.
So I encourage you, if it's not your boss, and if it's not someone that you owe a great deal of deference, don't let people get away with this, because you're just encouraging their bad behavior. And it's tough, right? I have to overcome my own natural passivity. But I think it's important that we stop people, that we don't let them behave badly, and that we don't let them take us hostage. And we should not be just passive victims of, their meandering monologues.
So they're impersonal as well as personal gods, but also then they're not necessarily in any way benignly disposed towards human beings. And this even includes some of the early Middle Eastern.
Yeah, we need to take our own side. When someone steps on your toes, say, excuse me. When people, behave badly, and there's a low likelihood that they're going to retaliate against you in a way that will be destructive, right? We have to call them out for it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. You've said that 1,000 times. This is boring. I'm going to move on. All right. We can't allow this.
Religions from which Christianity eventually emerged in Gnosticism and other Middle Eastern traditions. There is something like Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism then, in some of its forms, assumes the permanence of two principles in the world, light and dark, and doesn't, in some of its forms, doesn't even assume that.
So in Los Angeles, a lot more people get killed as pedestrians than as drivers. And so frequently when I'm crossing the street, a car will be coming right up to me. And I have to like yell frequently the F word. And then they stop. But I usually check to see who the driver is. And if they're a member of a group that commits a disproportionate amount of violent crime, I don't yell and scream and wave my hands at them. But otherwise, I call people out. On the other hand, the downside to that is that it gets me emotionally activated and it can take me an hour or two to come down. So sometimes I'm just stoical about it and ignore it. Other times I try to call people out. It's a balancing act. I don't like being activated and annoyed and angry for an hour or two.
The light will eventually prevail. It could prevail, but it might not prevail.
Oh, Chris, I'm really beginning to feel for Sam Harris here, because I can hear him becoming maybe a little bit impatient.
Yeah, I think he's got the point. He's
got the point.
Ready for it to continue because, so again, the kind of position here seems to be that there are...
So there are a lot of people I know, I just don't have the bandwidth for them. They are just too tiring. They are too demanding. I can't allow them into my lives. So I'm in a lot of 12-step programs, and so there are a lot of very needy people who, if I return their calls, they would very happily just cry on the phone to me. They would express their suicidal ideation. Right? I don't put up with that. Right? I've told a friend of mine that you can't talk to me about your suicidal thoughts. You should talk to someone, a medical professional, a mental health professional, but I don't want to hear about them.
Religions or cultures which do not make a distinction between supernatural and natural, and that the kind of contemporary atheism is a product of modernity.
So when it comes to bad drivers, all right, I don't try to be dead right. I don't deliberately put myself in the way of ongoing traffic, but there's a walk sign, I'm crossing the street, and people are on their phone, and their car's just slowly moving towards me, like, or sometimes I slapped their car, and then they get mad at me that I slapped their car that was about to hit me. Other thing I don't like is that walking around in Beverly Hills, it seems like about half of people are on their phones while they're walking. So I say, excuse me, if they're like coming, about to hit me. It's just really bad pedestrian etiquette. Now, bad driving etiquette, bad pedestrian etiquette due to cell phones. And I think a moderate amount of, excuse me, we need to do more of it to try to get people into line.
So it's kind of trapped into the monotheistic or like modern religious framework. But if you go back, you wouldn't have modern atheists. If you went to cultures where there was...
Yeah, there are certain movie theaters that I would not go to because they tend to be populated with people who are very loud and rude and noisy. So sometimes I've just given up parts of the public square.
No concept of secularity, you wouldn't have secular people because it wouldn't make sense.
Right. But he also says that, atheism is like a reaction against a monotheistic religion. It's not, so it's just really a different...
Religion's really important for some people like me. It's not at all important for a lot of other people who frequently lead far more upstanding lives than I do, right? There are plenty of people I know who are more moral than I am, more upstanding than I am, more successful than I am, who are married with kids, and they just don't give a darn about religion. So religion's important for some people, just empirically. It seems to be really important for certain people, but for plenty of people, they're just fine without it.
Facet of money. Anyway, but he doesn't really support that point. I don't think he just says it. But Chris, he's gish-galloping. He's not actually answering the question.
Well, how dare you, Matt?
But what do we do about people who are walking and looking at their cell phones at the same time? I mean, I think we need to start giving $5,000 fines for being on your cell phone while driving. I think that's just an absolute disaster. But I think we need to start finding people who are walking in crowded areas while looking down at their cell phones. And now there's a better and worse way to do this. All right, you should look up every 2 seconds. Those people are 100% better than those who only look up every 4 seconds. But it's a huge problem, particularly in Beverly Hills, downtown LA, Manhattan, right? Any busy city street is just plugged up and made coarse and less navigable because all the people are looking down at their phones while walking. All right, if you want to check your phone, stop, look at your phone, and then start walking. I'm not perfect here, but overwhelmingly, when I want to check my phone, I stop. I check my phone, and then I start listening to Moby Dick.
He's giving illustrative examples. It's just these are all relevant. So Zoroastrian. He's now talking about.
Maybe we need all of this context about how there's many polytheistic religions, but Indian polytheism is maybe not quite the same because it
So one thing that I love about Orthodox Judaism is that you're not permitted to be on your cell phones on the Sabbath and on key Jewish holidays. It's really nice. Most of my social time with Orthodox Jews these days is during the Sabbath and Jewish holidays, and nobody's on their cell phone. And cell phones aren't going off, and people aren't distracted by their cell phones. So I know that there was one key member of the Giuliani administration who told Giuliani that he was an Orthodox Jew so that he could just get the Sabbath off to be with his family.
It could be different aspects of the one God. I mean, this is all, we hope, pertaining, it's all necessary background for us to understand the answer he's going to give, we assume, at some point to the original question.
Let's see where it's going.
So there's a whole wide range of phenomena that come under some. By the way, the best book ever written, to my mind, by a philosopher, at least, on religion is William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience, because he looks at mental, kind of subjective experiences of a variety of people, including himself, but he's very aware of the diversity of religions.
Yeah, some people need vital spiritual and religious experiences, and other people don't. And there is a predictor for good behavior that's far more powerful than whether or not people believe in God, or whether or not people believe that God wrote the Bible, or whether or not people are religious. And that is, do people have friends? Are people connected? Right? Are people able to sustain relationships with other people? Right? People who are able to sustain relationships with others are invariably far more pleasant and reliable to interact with than people who cannot maintain relations.
And so my first reason is that religion, whatever else it may be, is definitely not an intellectual mistake, or not primarily. It's something much more profound. And you can see that from its near universality in human culture, and the fact that once monotheism, Christian or Jewish or other monotheism, was rejected, the underlying need for some.
Okay. Also, I have significantly reduced my live streaming and the type of live streaming I do while strolling, because I recognize it had a negative effect on other people. So if I just walk around with my phone like this, like a normal person, that doesn't have negative externalities. Like, no one seems to be bothered. But when I walk around with my phone on a gimbal, right, that provides a better experience for the viewer, but it's threatening and it creates externalities for all sorts of people around me. So I have largely abandoned filming with a gimbal around other people, because I recognize that it makes a lot of other people uncomfortable. On the other hand, if I just walk down the street, talking to my phone, whether I'm live streaming or talking to friends or family, that doesn't seem to produce any negative externalities to other people. I do make a point to look up every couple of seconds so that I'm not bumping into other people. What about weaponized smartphone use? For example, filming strangers. Generally speaking, I think that's a bad idea. Flashing the phone menacingly in front of cigarette smokers. Yeah, I think these are both very bad ideas. All right, back to decoding the gurus.
Framework of belief or of ideas or of a worldview of some kind, of which bolsters the human sense of importance, both as an animal, a species in the cosmos, and as of the individuals.
Okay, bolstering one's sense of importance. The way that people do this is through having a hero system, right? And religion can be a hero system, but hero systems do not require religion. So one big problem that religion has in the world today is that whenever it hits the news, it is almost for something bad. Because unless you were raised in a religion, it doesn't make sense to you. I think there was some Australian Rugby League, first round of the Australian Rugby League playoffs that went on this weekend in Las Vegas. And friends of mine in Australia are really excited to see if rugby league takes off in the United States. And I made the point, no one here has mentioned it to me. It's never appeared in any of the news media that I consume. Sports means nothing to you overwhelmingly unless you're raised with the sport. You have all these emotional memories. So I have spent hundreds of hours discussing cricket with my brother. And I spent hundreds of hours, watching cricket with family and friends. So it has a lot of resonance for me. If you didn't grow up with cricket, the odds are 99.9 to 1 that you're not going to get anything out of cricket, right? The reason that different sports have meaning to you is because you grew up with them and they had an emotional resonance. And same with religion. Unless you're raised in Orthodox Judaism or Roman Catholicism or Hinduism, it overwhelmingly is unlikely to mean anything to you. So Ernest Becker developed the idea of hero system in The Denial of Death. He says, this is the terror, to have emerged from nothing, to have a name, a consciousness of the self, to have deep inner feelings, an excruciating inner yearning for life and for self-expression and for significance, and with all this yet to die. It seems like a hoax. What kind of deity would create such a complex and fancy worm food? So the idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human animal like nothing else. It is a mainspring of human activity designed largely to avoid the fatality of death, to overcome it by denying death in some way that is the final destiny of man. So we're all aware of our mortality, and this creates anxiety and fear. And the way that we can properly function with these fears is that we deny death by striving to be heroes. Right? That we will take part in activities that our community tells us indicates we are part of something bigger than just our physical body, that we are part of something that will live on past our physical death, and that this will grant us a form of immortality. So it's easy to understand how a great live streamer or artist or writer or musician can achieve this type of immortality through the creation of a great work, which will continue to affect people long after their death. But very few people have this ability. So how do the masses, the great masses of mediocre people, fulfill their urge for heroism? Well, society acts as the vehicle in which the vast, overwhelming majority of people act out their urge for heroism. Right, so we disguise our struggle by piling up figures in a bank book, right, because that's part of our hero system, or by having a slightly better home in the neighborhood, or a bigger car, a better car, brighter children. But underneath all of our striving throbs the ache of a need to feel cosmically special, no matter how we mask it. So we deny death by becoming fully absorbed in our social role, our communal role, our tribal role, our national role, and we then strive for whatever our community, our society, our tribe deems as most desirable, be it money or fame or status, or performing God's commandments, or believing in Jesus, right? So we can't live if we think about death too much, right? But we deny death through our heroic achievements, right? When you doubt your own immortality, when you doubt the value of your life, when you doubt that you have any cosmic significance, right? For most people, this is absolutely crushing.
Who comprise it went on and was expressed in the 20th century in many different, and the 19th century and even the 18th century, but certainly in the 20th century in ideas of history which are very like some Christian ideas of history.
So I think we did have a little.
We did have some kind of answer there.
Summary there, right?
He did circle back to an answer there. Let's give him credit. He explained that, one, he thinks new atheists have got it wrong because religion is ubiquitous, so it must be doing something pretty important.
Useful.
Yeah. And two, that he thinks that people need a kind of underlying.
Wait, isn't this guy here the bloke who criticized Duvid for being bad for the Jews? That Joseph Cohen?
Yesterday I was attacked by a mob of anti-Semites. They spat on me, kicked me, pushed me, and tried to beat me with sticks.
Am I with you with this?
The violence was instigated by Ali Dawa, who incited the mob to attack.
I'm never gonna live. The killing.
You condemn
6 kids.
Ali, what is this?
Huh?
What is this?
What is that?
Look at you. Look at you. Look at you. I'm not going to do anything. It's a bait.
Not a religious person. You're Zionist scum. That's what you are. You're Zionist scum. Hey, this ain't Israel. This ain't Israel.
Ali, get up.
This ain't Israel. This ain't Israel. This ain't Israel. This ain't Israel, bro. This ain't Israel, bro.
I'm Israel. Hi. I'm Israel. I'm Israel. This is why we need a country. All they're proving is why we need a country. Imagine living under these people.
Free Palestine.
Okay, so this is how Mr. Cohen feels heroic. And the Twitter, the post says, London's Speaker Corner was a symbol of free speech where people have debated ideas since 1872. Now it's infested with loud Islamist orcs upholding jihadi rhetoric. Ooh, that sounds rather harsh. Surely there's a nicer way of framing that. It's just a clash of hero systems, bro.
Worldview, a moral framework, and so on, and that if you don't have religion, then people like atheists will just substitute it with something else, probably something worse.
Marxism, or like the history of 20th century bad ideas. And
the second one you hear a lot, don't you? You hear it from religious conservatives who will say that the problem with leftists is that they've abandoned the good old fashioned traditional religion. They've substituted it with all these terrible new secular religions. Yeah.
Yes, and he did also manage to point in a book recommendation, William James's Varieties of Religious Experience. A good book, but sort of an aside, and an indulgent aside, given the length of the answer. And the other point that he wanted to make is that there's a more different types of religion than monotheism, right? So atheism and the new atheists are mostly talking about the monotheistic traditions. They're not talking about animists and like polytheists and so on.
That feels pretty weak though, right? Because any atheistic argument that applies to Christianity is also going to apply to...
No, I mean, that's just, does it, Matt? Like, hold on.
Okay, didn't George Galloway just win an election? He's an anti-Israel British politician.
You would think, would you not, that he was a pacifist, that he defines himself as anti-war. Now, how can this be said in good conscience by someone who has just, standing by the side of the dictator of Syria on the 30th of July, referred to the 154 heroic operations conducted in Iraq by the so-called resistance, a resistance that's run, as we know, by a senior bin Ladenist and by many of the former secret police of the Ba'athist regime. How can someone say they're anti-war and they care about casualties, that they praise 154 operations a day?
145.
I ask you. 145. He's coming down a bit.
That's what it says in your leaflet.
It's not that many.
It says 145 in your leaflet.
Let me remind you of what some of those operations were. The blowing up by military-grade explosives of the headquarters of the United Nations in Baghdad a few months after the intervention, as it was being tenanted by Sergio de Mello, one of the great international civil servants of our time, who was fresh from, Amy knows more about this than I, but fresh from his role in the very belated supervision of the independence of East Timor from Indonesia and the holding of a free election in East Timor. And the jihadists who murdered him put out a communique saying, we have today put an end to the life of this disgusting man because he freed Timor from Muslim Holy Land in Indonesia. These people are not pacifists, ladies and gentlemen, nor are they anti-imperialists. If you haven't noticed, they call for the restoration of a lost empire, the caliphate, and the imposition of Sharia law on all non-believers within its borders. That's not pacifism. That's not anti-imperialism. And to praise the people who do this...
Yeah, he's right. People like George Galloway are not pacifists. They just simply support a different hero system. They have an empathy for Arabs and for Muslims, and see the West as having persecuted these groups, and so they side with Arabs and Muslims against what they see as, Western imperialism.
To sully the name of Charles James Fox, ladies and gentlemen, with such a squalid enterprise of brigandage and conquest is truly revolting. It's almost as funny as Michael Moore saying that the Zarqawiyite resistance in Iraq is for him the same as the Minutemen of the American Revolution. There comes a point, and I think it's come by now, where what people say is
self-discrediting. Okay, Christopher Hitchens certainly had the gift of the gab. Very frequently, disastrously wrong, but he always sounds profound. Back to decoding the gurus, these guys don't sound amazing. They just make some pretty solid points.
Hold your horses. He wasn't finished, so we're probably cutting him off before he's gonna, bring up the better arguments.
In which history is a meaningful moral drama. By the way, that's completely different from some of the pre-Christian writings on history of the Greeks and the Romans, because although there's a diversity there, the idea that there was any overall moral meaning to history was absent. History was, and even in Aristotle, he talks about the regimes of...
So, yeah, the guy just blathers on and on and on, like many people that we have to deal with in real life. All right, let's cut to the chase here.
Any idea, or atheism? What about democracy or anything? No, that's impossible.
Yeah, well, I think in general, he doesn't like the new atheist because in general, his broader thing is that the assumption of progress is wrong. New atheists, insofar as they are embodying a desire for a progress in thinking, are wrong.
Yeah.
But his arguments here, there does seem to be...
This is my issue, right? Like you strip away all of the name dropping, and he's a very erudite guy. He's obviously,
Yeah, he knows the people he's talking about.
He is learned.
Oh, good God.
He is learned, but this is baffling.
Yeah, people who just want to show off their learning and just want to monologue endlessly are obnoxious.
With bullshit, isn't it? Like you've got the fundamental bones of his case is just what we just said, and when you just say it like that, it sounds pretty stupid. But if you,
it just sounds weak.
It's just a weak argument. It is. But if you add in,
so yeah, a lot of people with that English accent, be it John Gray or Christopher Hitchens, they make a lot of terrible arguments, but because they've got that Oxford accent, right, it sounds profound.
This great big long discursive tour of all of Western thought from the ancients to
not just Western thought.
That's true. World thought through all the recorded history. Then maybe you don't notice that that's the fundamental point he's making. Yeah.
Well, let's see. It's almost at an end, so it might come to like a kind of summary point.
Some of your listeners, maybe the first book by Bronze Age Pervert, and this was in the New Statesman. They can look it up if they want. I think there's a paywall, but you can look at 2 or 3 articles without paying any money. And there I went back to Ayn Rand, who, of course, emigrated from Russia. And when she emigrated from Russia, I think in 1922 or 23 or something like that, but from about 1890 to about 1920, the biggest intellectual influence in Russia had not been Marx or Marxists, it had been Nietzsche. And there were Nietzschean everything, Nietzschean liberals, Nietzschean communists, Nietzschean nationalists, Nietzschean Orthodox Christian, everything. And one of the things that entertained me I've never been around in her first book, We the Living, was the sections that she later took out in which she says, which the hero, a thinly fictionalized version of herself, says to her Bolshevik lover, "I detest your ideals, but I love your methods."
So maybe not, Matt. Maybe we should give up at this point because
So a lot of people like Christopher Hitchens and John Gray, they say a lot of things that just sound profound, that sound amazing. This is what gurus do. They have an ease with language. They know how to push emotional buttons. They just have these sayings and these insights that just roll off the lips, and you feel like, oh wow, the world's just been uncovered for me, and I now see what's really happening. But then upon examination, a lot of these beautiful sayings just fall apart.
Yeah, he's got the Ayn Rand and a book review he wrote of Bronze Age Perverts books. Bronze Age Pervert being an online alt-right guy, but is it necessary to go into Ayn Rand's history of immigration and her jokes that she makes in individual segments of her book that you like? Like, it's again the level of indulgence seems very high. And this is something that every academic is familiar with at a conference, where it's kind of comedy trope where somebody says it's more of a comment than a question, and they proceed to blabber on endlessly about their ideas without really posing the question to the person who ostensibly they're supposed to be engaging with. And maybe John Gray, I hear that his books are more tightly written or whatever the case might be, but I think this is really, it is an academic disease, but it's a philosopher disease and a guru disease, that they really go on elaborate, like, verbal wanderings around, and they like to sprinkle it with the people that they met, with the big books, the weighty tomes, the figures that they know. And I guess some of it is relevant, but like, it did his points really need all of these examples at this, like, because we're not finished yet, right? We are. We're going to stop here. But like...
I got an email from Fahad. All right, we haven't had Fahad on the show for, 4 years? Be very exciting if he can come back.
We're at 1920. No, we're slightly past the Enlightenment, but we're still not up. And like, could have been talking about Dawkins and Hitchens.
Yeah,
right?
this
like
is
the new atheists. He's got one of them right in front of him.
Yeah, it's incredibly self-indulgent, isn't it? It's and it is like Jordan Peterson. It reminds me of him a lot. But it's also a gishgalop, isn't it? I think it can be.
Yeah, what's Sam supposed to say at the end of this? Yeah, so that was your complaints about the new atheists, and that's one of the things that people do, is that they kind of layer in so many things that by the time that you have the point to respond, and usually at the end they'll say something controversial as well, and another point is blah blah blah, and then your option is, do I try and work my way back through all of that, or do I move on to the next question, because we've only got like 5 minutes left right now, and this is going to take like to debate his characterization of Nietzsche. Like, is that worth your time? But in most conversations that you have in life, people would observe a social cue where, I've been monologuing for quite a long time. So, and you did just ask me a pretty straightforward set question. So let me just say, this is what I meant. And
in the world that I experience, all right, I can't usually talk for longer than 20 seconds without getting interrupted. I mean, I think that's pretty close to the norm, right? In the real world, right, you look for affirmation that people are interested in what you're having to say. And if you don't get that, you just wind up, right? That's what normal people do. Right, they look for nodding of the head, or or some kind of grunt, or some signal that people are, reacting positively to your speaking. Otherwise, a normal person just wraps up. So, with most people I know, I can talk for about 20 seconds or so before I get interrupted. And you don't want to go beyond about 15 seconds unless you're getting positive feedback from people. So still hoping to get Fahad on. I sent him the link a few minutes ago.
Move on, but this is not the way of podcasts and gurus. It's almost a desirable characteristic in podcast world. If you're able to, it's not. It's not desirable, but it's, some people, I think, mistake that for illustrating the profundity and depth of your thought. Right?
Yeah. I think a good way to evaluate these things is, one, you got to be more concise. If someone asks you a direct question, this is not a question that he's not unprepared for. He's written books about this, right? This is a bit like a PhD student who's asked to give the elevator pitch or the 3-minute description of what they're doing for their PhD. You should be able to distill it into a nicely organized little response, right? And he didn't. So that's his first crime, right? He's spoken for far too long on too many relevant points, as you said. The second crime is that he just hasn't answered the question, not to my satisfaction. Like,
right, you should develop an elevator pitch for anything that you want to say that's important to you.
Imagine if you set an essay test for a student and he said, explain the main objection to new atheism from so-and-so's point of view. And imagine if they gave you, and you were 2,000 words in, and you were traversing Ayn Rand's immigration from Russia, then you would fail them, because that's a shitty answer to the question. And this guy's a professor. You should be doing better, I think.
Yeah. It does remind me, of Tucker Carlson, whenever Putin said, to answer that, let me first provide a brief history of Russia. And like 35 minutes later, he's still talking about Peter the Great or whatever. So yeah, there does feel a bit like that. And the thing here is just to say that this isn't an isolated example where this, it's kind of particularly noticeable. When I was listening to it, I just realized after a while, wait, this is the same.
Right, so I've probably had 1,000 times people have asked me, why did you convert to Judaism? And so I have just cycled through different answers. So for many years, it was because I believed in it. I believed that it made people better. I believed that it would make me better. I believed that God gave the Torah. I was looking for something to hang my life on at a time when my life had absolutely fallen apart due to illness. So you can A, B, C, D test your elevator pitches for topics that are important to you. So I've probably been asked well over 100 times, what is the Alexander technique? And my response is boiled down for the last 10 years to it's a way of noticing how you respond to a stimulus and let go of those responses that don't serve you. So it's succinct, but it contains the essence of the Alexander technique. So also it should depend on the audience, right? Many people ask me why you convert to Orthodox Judaism. They're not interested in the religious truth component of that journey. They want to understand the social, the psychological aspect of the journey. So you don't give a social and psychological explanation to people who want a religious and theological explanation, and you don't give a theological explanation to people who want a psychological and social explanation.
It's the same question, and it goes on. But this happens a lot. You may have heard it on other podcasts recently with other guests where people do this. And there are options. You know, the other person in the conversation can interrupt them and be like, but the thing is that, especially in an interview context, there's a sort of dynamic where that would be rude in just terms of the actual interaction habitus that we have. Like if you say, sorry, you're going on for too long, we really need to get to the next question, that is taken as like you being rude, and the person is your guest, so you shouldn't do that. So
and the audience, at least some of the audience definitely doesn't like it, right? You shouldn't let them finish, let them elaborate further.
Oh yeah, some of them though if you go to Sam Harris's Reddit and look, a lot of people picked up on this monologuing tendency and they were not happy about it. And
okay, we
sure
got Fahad. Fahad, how's it going, bro?
Different people.
How you doing?
Long time no talk. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, long time, to be honest, and it's crazy. A lot of things have happened since then, by the way. I got 2 babies now, got married, everything's changed. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I'm quick. I got married quick and I got babies quick. Yeah, I know. But
wow.
Yeah, so it's nice.
How has that changed your life, getting married and having children?
I started to hate the Western countries. Even though I live here, I know. A lot of people say, you live here, shut the fuck up. I was born and raised in England. But the more I see, the more I started hating living. I don't know, man. I started hating living in the Western countries, to be honest. I feel like it's not for me. Even though, I'm telling you, I was born and raised in England. It's just I see how fake it is. Do you know what I'm saying? I used to actually believe in all that democracy and all that bullshit and all that nice life and stuff. First thing, you could take it in any aspect, it's fucked, it's changed. Everyone's gone woke. There's too much, they're getting involved in your kids. Like, for example, I just told you I have kids now, so I know how it feels. For them to come and, if my kid in Canada right now, he's 7 years old, and he goes to a teacher and tells the teacher, I'm a girl sign. They're allowed to deal with him, talk to him without letting me know. And they'll deal with him as a girl, and they'll talk to him as a girl. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is all that democracy and lives matters and all that bullshit. With Palestine, we saw it. I'm not saying Hamas is right. Hamas is fucked. But innocent people are dying and no one gives a fuck. Like it's nothing. Like, just bring the hostages. Yeah, I get that. But then people are dying. They shouldn't have taken hostages. They shouldn't have even done all this bullshit. But that's got nothing to do with innocent 30,000 people. 21,000 of them are kids. And you want me to believe in the old democracy and all that bullshit? They could shut. I don't want to get rude, but yeah, that's to be honest, that's the main 2 things I started hating. Remember when we used to talk? I used to compare England and Canada.
Yeah.
England is bad. To grow up in England is bad. You're just gonna become ghetto. Because I was there. I had to be a popular kid, to be one of these kids, you have to fight. Now it's even worse. Now you have to have a knife. But back in the days, you have to fight, you have to do this, you have to do that to stand out. You know what I'm saying? In Arabic countries, you have to be a good kid to stand out, to be honest. And I think that's in Israel as well, by the way. Don't get twisted. Because I think these people are still, religion plays a big role in that. You know what I'm saying? I think it's because of religion or something. That's one thing. I used to think Canada was a good thing. But then Canada's too woke. Too woke to a level. I got cousins here. They're born in 1986. What are they? 36, 37? They live in their family's basement. Because life is too slow. England life is too fast. Here life is too slow. But too slow to a bad level. Like I'm at work right now, half of the people with me at work, they say they're gay, but they don't look gay. I feel like they should be in mental hospital. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I swear, listen. Look, me, I'm not saying me, but I've been around, you know? I've been in 5 prisons. I've been in prison in France for 1 year, 2 months for trafficking people. Trafficking people, which means trying to bring Arabs into England for immigration, not in a bad way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like I know it sounds bad in the States and Canada, yeah. And I used to do it. I've been in Kenya, I've been in England, I've been in prison in England, I've been in Kenya, I've been everywhere. Norway, Finland, I used to take Rat, the Somalian thing. Anyway, all that bullshit, trust me, Canada's getting bad, really, really bad. Because literally what they've done is mental hospital, instead of fixing it, no, we could just take you and put you in a gay place. But a lot of these guys are going to commit suicide. I could see it. I could literally see it. Yeah, that's all that has changed in my mind anyway for the last 4 years. I know I spoke too much now.
No, it's great. It's great. It's wonderful to hear you. How are you supporting 2 children? How are you making money these days?
I work hard. Me, I manage. I actually own half a security company, so we catch people, and that's another thing as well. By the way, financials gone bad for people. I feel bad for them. Like I work, and I train security guards and everything, but we're undercover. You know, LP, where you wear your own clothes and stuff. Anyway, so it's been really bad recently because people can't afford it. I used to catch crackheads back in the days. Now I'm catching people with suits. I'm catching students, and they feel ashamed when I catch them, like it's their first time and they try and get away with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That means it's really bad. That means it's gone really bad. Mostly with this pussy. He's too fucking gay. Yeah, he wants to be gay. How Trudeau, he wants to be gay. That's up to him. But he's turning the whole country like that. And it's bad. It's really bad. I don't know. He needs to go.
Are there
I don't care who comes. Yeah.
Are there any signs that someone's more likely to be a shoplifter than someone else?
Yeah, obviously. That's what I just said. Basically, back in the days, it used to be very easy. You know what I'm saying? Like, my little trick was the shoes. Because crackheads can rob clothes, but it's hard to rob shoes. So you just look at their shoes and then you know if that makes sense. That's a little thing. But yeah, and then that reminds me, certain people, I used to train people. You can't train common sense. It's common sense. Sometimes to me it's common sense. God just told you, I've been in prison, I've done this, I've dealt with criminals. So I know them. As soon as he walks into the store, I'll be like, yeah, this guy's gonna steal. Do you know what I'm saying? Certain things you can't do education and then do it. It's nothing to do with school. It's something to do with hood or something. That's why he wrecked on me. Because I came from hood. I told you I came from 5 prisons and I came to Canada to change my life, and I did. I twisted whatever I learned, you know what I mean, from criminals and all that, and I'm done it with the company right now. So it's good. Even though I told you, Canada's nice to me, I'm not gonna lie. If you work hard here, they're nice to you. You could make money, but taxes are fucked. The problem is they take the taxes and they give it to crackheads. And that's what pisses you off. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And the tax has gone really, really high recently. Bro, to be honest, the countries they used to call third world countries are now much easier to live in. By the way, I came back from Dubai like a week ago. I was in Iraq. I bought a house in Iraq, and then I went to Dubai on holiday. Bro, these third world countries are the countries to live in. Not because I swear, not because I'm from there, nothing to do with that. Just common sense, tax-free, you're good, you're relaxed, there's not that much bills and people running after you, and you have to pay here, pay there, pay your fees, do that. You're just like a robot here now. Literally, you're just a robot. Whatever you make, you have to pay. And why would I have to pay half of whatever I make? And I'm living in a rich country. It's not like like in England, I get it, they're broke. But Canada's one of the richest countries in the world. Why would I have to pay half of what I make? Do you know what I'm saying? Half. Yeah. You're not asking for 15%, 10%. Literally, it gets to half because If you make more than 70 a year, then they'll take higher. Doesn't make sense to me anyway. I would rather go live in another country, and these countries are moving up quick. And the main reason they're moving up, back to politics, is MBS. As much as I don't like him, but he's working hard for his country and other countries around him.
What do you have against
They're
MBS?
gonna become the new Europe. The way he's doing it, he's fake. Whatever face he shows to the West is not the same face he shows to his people. If that makes sense. Like if you say anything to Saudi Arabia, not even get rude to him or anything, you could just say, I didn't like this place, for example, you'll go to prison. But then he'll come out on TV, speak English, try to be nice, try to say, yeah, it's not me, it's other people. He's basically Saddam Hussein, but in a more intelligent way.
But I've heard the argument that Arabs need a very strict ruler, otherwise they'll misbehave.
No, they need the ruler. Like okay, it depends which Arabs, by the way. Some Arabs are easy to rule, like Saudis. I could go rule them right now. They don't get, these people just want to eat and sleep. Do you know what I'm saying? They're like animals. Yeah. Iraqis are hard to rule. Iranians are hard to rule. Do you know what I'm saying? So because of the history or the culture or something, like Egyptians, the easiest to rule. Because if they had 1% common sense, this guy wouldn't stay a day. Sisi wouldn't stay for a day. He just fucked up the whole country for the next, 100 years. The debt and everything. You know what I'm saying? But Iraqis, no. Because of what they went through and even in history. You know what I'm saying? If you go back to history, Iraq has always been one of the hardest countries to rule because of them, they're more educated. You know what I'm saying? So they have parties, they have this, they have different beliefs, not religious beliefs, political beliefs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's hard to deal with. But Saudis are easy. Saudi, you could just tell them, you could just bring, like when he wanted to make them religious, he told them just religion. When he told them go dance, they just went all dance now. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't make sense. Do you know what I'm saying? How did ISIS come out of Saudi and then Saudi now are dancing? The same guy who used to go fight for ISIS is dancing for Rihanna or saying. Doesn't make sense. Do you know what I'm saying? But they're just like that. They're very easy. You can't do that to Iraqis. Iranians, you can't do it, but you have to do it by force, which is what's happening right now.
Which Arab countries do you think are run the most effectively and efficiently?
They're easy to listen. It depends what country. Like I'll tell you, most of the Khalij, which means the Gulf, most of the Gulf countries are easy to run because they're tribal. You know what I'm saying? It's easy to deal with them. Like I'll give you an example. I don't think you know that. You know Saudi, yeah, like the king of Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
He's not Salman. He's dad. Okay, Abdulaziz. Abdulaziz got married to all the tribe leaders. His kids, him and his kids, tried to get married to most of the tribe leaders. Like MBS's mom, her dad's a tribe leader and one of the most famous Arab tribe leaders. Nothing to do with him. So they wanted to bring everything together. So basically, if people say they don't like MBS, for example, then his mom's tribe would back him up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So he's done that. Yeah, he's done that with most of his kids. Now, 90% of the biggest tribes in Saudi Arabia are married to his kids, Abdulaziz. So it's easy to run, you know what I'm saying? Because they're all tribes, they're all the same. Iraq is divided into like 3-4 different cultures. Even Iran, by the way. Iran, if it was going to separate, it would become 6 countries. Iraq will become 3 because the rest are not strong. 3, which would be Shia, Sunni, and then Kurdish. You know what I'm saying? Iran will become 6. Turkey will become 5. Turkey has Arabs, has Kurdish. They have a lot of Kurdish. 38 million Kurdish.
And so the Gulf states, so the Gulf states, like the one that hosted the World Cup of soccer, that they seem to be run pretty effectively.
Okay. It's very basic. Go Google right now, population of Qataris, not people who live in Qatar, Qataris. they're like 600,000. And they're getting paid well, really well. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they get benefits to a level where they'll get benefits for holiday a year. So, and you still have people who go against them. I love that guy who's against the King of Qatar. I love him. He's a poet. And he was in prison in Qatar for 5 years. Read about him. He's just a crazy motherfucker that he doesn't like to stay quiet when he thinks something's happening wrong, even though they're telling him, yo, we'll give you money, we'll do this for you, we'll give you whatever you want, we'll give you fame. But he's one of these guys who think, no, if you don't give my people, then I'm gonna fight you. His name is Muhammad ibn Adib. Anyway, he's a poet. And so I'm saying, Qatar, with all that richness, with all that money, and you still get a couple of people who go against it. Because Qatar, it's a bit mixed, that's why. When the country is mixed, it's a bit hard to control. Saudi's not mixed. Tribes, everyone knows everyone. We even know them because I'm from South Iraq. South Iraq are the same tribes as Saudi Arabia, by the way. And most of us have roots with Saudi Arabia. But we separated because we're Shia and they're Sunni. So that made the little line between us. Other than that, let me give you an example. The tribe leader of MBS is in Iraq. He's in Iraq. He's in Najaf.
Is he Shia?
I know. No, he's not. That's what I'm saying. He's not. The tribe leader's not Shia, but most of South Iraq are Shia. Not most. Now, all of them. They used to be most. Now, because of the wars and they got kicked out. Like 40% of Basra was Sunni, but now 90% of Basra are Shia. So it's a bit changed now. But I'll give you an example, yeah?
Yeah.
Tribe leader of Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain are the same. Imagine that. Same tribe leader, the guy who's in Iraq. They're all from a tribe called, I'm from that tribe. It's big, really big. But anyway, that tribe's called Anizza. Okay? And then you have, for example, Qatar. He's from a tribe called Tamim. And that's why they called him Tamim, the king of Qatar. The tribe leader is in Iraq as well. He's in Basra. I'll tell you why most of the tribe leaders moved. Even the ones before Saudi Arabia was Saudi Arabia. It was two countries in a way. The tribe that was leading the other side, their tribe leader is in Iraq as well. They moved to Iraq because Iraq was meant to be the rich, before oil, before anything. Iraq is the only country that had two rivers, and they had money. They were much better developed than a desert like Saudi Arabia and all these other Gulf countries. Then the oil kicked in. But before that, they used to go work in Iraq to make money and come back. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and how much time have you been spending in Iraq? You go back once a year?
Yeah, because I drop off my wife. Now I dropped off my wife and the kids. I go pick them up again in like 3 months. So I went, saw my family. My family came to Dubai. I stayed with them like 10 days, had fun. But yeah, I go Iraq. I'm in love with Iraq. Iraq is the new big thing. Iraq is basically, you remember when they used to say American Dream in the 80s and 70s? Mm-hmm. That's what's happening in Iraq right now. Because the only thing that was stopping, Iraq is a rich country. And Iraq, a lot of, by the way, if you search that up, I'll send you the link. Iraq has one of the most best education, like people who will finish like 90%, 98%, you know what I'm saying, in their education and stuff. So Iraq, with all these doctors and everything, they're good. The only problem they had was they couldn't settle down, you know, because of the wars, because of everything. Everyone wanted to become the leader, this, that. Recently, that changed because one of the main parties who won the elections, he left. He said, you know what? He couldn't make a government, even though he won the elections. He thought, you know what? I'm out. And you know him, I think. You've heard of him, Muqtada Al-Sadr.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering. How's he doing?
He won. Okay, that's why everything settled down. He won the last elections, but then he couldn't make a government. By the way, Israel's the same. Sometimes you win elections, but you can't make
Right.
government. You can't. Yeah. Okay. So
Muqtada
Iraq couldn't.
Al-Sadr.
He couldn't. He tried.
Yeah.
Muqtada Al-Sadr. He tried. He couldn't. So he thought, you know what? I'm out. And he is out, and that made everything calm down. So now, by the way, let me give you an example of how good Iraq is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a land, government will give you 85,000 American dollars to build that land and build the house, and you could pay it back with zero interest and pay it back like, I don't know, $50 a month. You know what I'm saying? You could pay it as high as you want and as low as you want with zero interest. Okay. Now, if you want to get a house, there's two. You could get two houses. You could get this one where you build your house, but you have to have a land. You know what I'm saying? So you could build it. And lands are not that expensive. But houses right now, like certain areas where my uncle lived, by the way, if I sell his house, I could buy 3 houses in the States. His house is worth 900 or something. It's $5. Wait, how much was it? No, wait. Okay. Anyway, his house, and by the way, I'm talking about the South here. I'm not talking about the capital. I'm talking about South Iraq, but it's a nice area in the South, right?
Yeah.
Their houses are worth now 900,000 American dollars. I couldn't believe it.
Do they have air conditioning? Do they have air conditioning?
They have everything, and they love technology. Like they have the newest phone, the biggest TVs. Because they didn't have it, you know what I'm saying? So they're crazy about it. Like if I come to them with a phone that's a little bit old, they'll be like, you're old. You know what I'm saying? They really love that technology, everything. The only problem is electricity. And they're working on it. Other than that, bro, they're getting, and by the way, they're getting benefits now. That Iraq didn't have that back in the days. They're getting benefits, and Iraq has always had something where it's not a food bank, but it's something that Kuwait has that, by the way, as well, where they'll give you food every month. And you have enough. It depends how many kids you have. So they'll give you oil for cooking, give you flour, give you rice, give you this. And it's enough. Most of the time, that's enough. Literally, that's your shopping. Do you know what I'm saying? And on top of that, go on.
What do we do about Gaza? What do we do? What's the solution for the Gaza problem?
Bro, the solution is, let me tell you what the biggest problem is right now, okay?
Yep.
Politically, okay? The problem is if Trump was there, Trump has this thing where he'll say what's on his mind and he'll say, no, stop. And they can't accuse Trump of being anti-Semitic or anti-Israeli. Why? Because Trump has always helped them. You remember he moved the embassy, done this, done that.
Yes.
So
yes.
Trump has this power to do whatever he wants right now. With the Democratic fucking party, because they feel like, and that's happening in England as well. You know what I'm saying? Because they feel like if they say anything, they're anti-Semitic, they're with their Muslims, they're this, they're terrorists, this, that. So they feel like they have to go that extra step where they have to shut the fuck up, and whatever Netanyahu does, it's okay. Even though the Israelis themselves are not happy with Netanyahu. Because you know what's happening? They're making their image look bad in front of the world. And a lot of Israelis don't like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Forget about Muslims, forget about Gaza, forget about everything. Their image in front of Spain, when Spain comes out, when Belgium comes out, when all these countries come out, the world's not the same. It's not like back in the days, US and Britain. It's not like that no more. It's bigger. People are getting involved. And that's what Russia always wanted. And it's happening right now. Now China's really important. Now Russia's really important. The States spoke to China to speak to the Houthis. And China came out and said that. You know what I'm saying? Now it's not the same. So you can't just make it like this. You're gonna look like the bad person now. At the start, it kicked off as, okay, boom, couple of terrorists went to Israel. Now you look like you're bombing the fuck out of innocent people. Forget about Hamas, because you're not giving numbers of Hamas, how much you're killing, how many Hamas are dying, but we know that 21,000 are dead. So I'm not talking emotionally here. I'm talking about common sense. Do you know what I'm saying? So
yes.
People don't like this. They don't like what's happening. And you can't use the genocide card with Russia when just, I don't know, 80 kids died. That's fucked. 80 kids is still kids dying, right? 80 kids died in 1 year. and then come and not use this with Gaza. You know what I'm saying? People are like, how do you want us to stop talking to Russia, to be on your side, on the Ukrainian side, and then come and see 100 times worse, and you want us to stay quiet? That's what Spain is saying. You know what I'm saying? That's why Spain, one of the borders, and spoke. That's what Belgium is saying. Some countries have the balls to say this. You know what I'm saying? That's why the Italian today, she's with Biden, and Biden said it. Check Biden's post on Instagram. He was talking about his life. Yes, he came spoke to me about Gaza and how no aids are coming through and everything. So it's actually, you know what the problem is? It's making it worse for Israel than for Palestinians. And now Israel is forced to, is going to be forced to have a Palestinian country. Back in the days, they could have got away with it. You know, left and right, and what Netanyahu was doing, go to Saudi Arabia, do this, Dubai, boom. I videoed a couple of videos where I saw a couple of like Israelis in Dubai airport and stuff. He could have got away with it until what happened. And his reaction made it worse. Does that make sense? If he reacted in a more clever way where you could just act. I couldn't believe how stupid Israelis are. You could have just acted like you care about innocent people. Just fucking act. But they were scared to act. Why? Because the party he's with are the left. You know, no, they're not. Wait,
they're right. They're settlers. They support the settlers. They support Greater Israel.
But it's stupid. It's stupid, man. Let's say I do want to kill people in Gaza, okay? At least I'll act in front of the world that I can. Do you know what I'm saying? He doesn't even want to do that because he's scared of losing his supporters. So he's in a situation which is fucked. And by the way, that's why today, what's his name? The guy who went to the States without telling Netanyahu? I forgot his name off.
I don't know. But what's the solution? Get a Palestinian state, or one state that is 50% Palestinian, 50% Jewish? What's the solution?
War, whatever, the war party or whatever war government that they made. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but recently they had this thing where they checked what people think of Benny Gantz and Netanyahu. Benny Gantz got 60%, Netanyahu got 38%. That's why the states called him. And Kamala Harris spoke today, and she said it's not acceptable, this, that people are dying and this. And I think, I don't know, bro. It's just, trust me. I'm just going to act like an Israeli here, okay? It's fucked for me because I'm scared to go anywhere in the world. And a lot of people are going to look at me in a bad way. And that's how people used to look at the Americans. For a certain time when America was in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it's even worse. I remember I was in Dubai in 2009. Mm-hmm. And so I went in this thing called Safari where they take you in a car and drifting and stuff. There was two people with me. I asked them, where you from? They're like, we're Canadian. So I was asking where in Canada, this, that. And they're like, to be honest, we're not Canadian. We're American, but we know that everyone hates America, so we say we're Canadian. And that's what I'm trying to say about Israel. Now, Israel, and the only reason he's doing this, he knows this is happening, by the way. But he's carrying on for one reason, because he knows the day he stops is the day they take him out, and he might even go to prison. So he's willing to fuck up the whole Israeli image, Israeli country, everything, just so he could stay. And I don't know how people are allowing it. Like I know people are protesting, but it's fucked because I keep saying it. Forget about everything. The image, they've been paying billions to all these media and everything, CNN, Fox, this, that, and all the posts about how Israel is a nice country and how Arabs live there and Hamas is a terrorist and whatever, this, that. This all fucked up. 20 years they've been paying money just to clean the image because the Nakba made it bad. So they thought, you know what, new generation they don't care about Nakba. But you're bringing all that back by doing what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? People are like, yo, what's happened? Even like I'm at work right now. Even crackheads are asking me what's happening. I'll show you a video where the protest walks past. Crackheads are protesting with the Palestinians just because they see kids dying and stuff. Because you don't have to be you don't have to be a Muslim. You don't have to be nothing.
But what's the solution? What's the solution to the Gaza problem?
The solution is how is Hamas still there? Why are people still supporting Hamas? Common sense, right? Why?
Because of the situation.
Because you're talking about our home.
Because the situation in Gaza is horrible.
Thank you.
Situation created Hamas.
Exactly. Trust me on this, okay? I swear on my mom's life, I'm talking about myself. I'm Shia. Hamas don't like us because they're religious, so they think Shia are bad people, by the way. Even though Iran is helping them, but they think Iran are not Muslims. This is something between Muslims that people don't know. But the only reason I would know how they're feeling and I would be with Hamas is because it makes sense. I'm not asking for Israel to go. Israel's not going to go. Tough luck. Palestinians, shut the fuck up. Israel's not going to go. But now give them their right. Blockade for 15 years. That's some crazy ass shit. Imagine this. What did you expect them to do? Like, I swear, what would you do? What would anyone in the world do if you have if you know Gaza, has the most doctors. They're very educated. That's why it's hard for Israel. Let me tell you something. I always say this because I talk about this on Instagram, by the way. I love talking about politics on Instagram and stuff. But anyway, let me tell you about this. Arab countries are different. Some of them are educated, okay? Like Egyptians. They love education, boom, boom. Iraqis are more violent, okay? There's different countries, right? I told you, Saudis are more tribes and stuff, and most of the Gulf. Palestine is the hardest to fight. Why? Because they're educated and they're brave, to be honest. And their braveness comes from the Quran. Because they don't believe in no politics, nothing. They believe the Quran says fight for your rights. You know what I'm saying? So they'll go fight. And they're educated. So they're not stupid. Iraqis, when they fought Americans, they were blowing themselves up, doing this, because they're stupid. They didn't know what to do. Gazans are very clever. You could get 2 people who will go blow up 5 tanks and come back. And these tanks, Merkava 4 cost $6 million. So when you see Merkavas go like this is money gone just like this. and even Israel says it. These people came, hit us and left. They came, bombed us because they're clever. You know what I'm saying? They're not just fighting and they're brave and no. They're educated. Most of them are they finished their degree. Most of them have masters. I'll give you an example. You know, there's a guy, his name is wait. Zubdi. What's his first name? Anyway, this guy but I'll find his name, but I forgot his first name. This guy finished school in Gaza, okay? And then he came to the States, okay? Imagine this. When he came to the States, he became a teacher at one of the biggest universities, and he was one of the main engineers for F-35. The warplane.
Okay. Wow.
And Zubdi, I'll find his name. So what I'm trying to get to is these guys are not stupid. You see them like this? Okay, go search up all of them. Hania, boom, this guy, go search up what education they finished. And see if you bring them to the States, they become scientists, bro. They're not stupid. That's why it's hard to fight them. That's why right now Israel, one of the strongest armies in the world, and they still couldn't do nothing after 5 months. And they keep having excuses on which area they want. You know what I'm saying? They said this, they said that. Now they say Rafah. Okay, if I give you Rafah, is Hamas gonna go? It's still not gonna go. Trust me. I'll guarantee you. I'll talk to you in a month, and I'll tell you, even if they take Rafah, what? Hamas are all in Rafah right now. They're not in Rafah. They're everywhere. And you're making people go to Hamas by what you're doing. When people go to pick up food and you shoot them up, you're making people go towards Hamas. You're making Hamas, if anything. Let me tell you this, okay? Two things that are really important. One of them, I'll tell you guys a story, okay? There's a guy, fucking hell, let me try to remember his name. Azwari, yeah, Al-Azwari, okay? Al-Azwari is a Tunisian guy. Now listen to this story. Azwari is a Tunisian guy who grew up in Tunis. There was unemployment, really bad, boom, boom, boom. So my guy went to Sudan at the time. He worked, by the way, he's an engineer, okay? So he worked in a factory. Worked there, everything was going good. Now, that factory at the time, Al-Bashir, who's Sudan's leader, he changed it from a normal factory to a military factory. So they asked him, do you want to stay? He's like, yes, I'll stay. My guy stayed, done his thing, happy ending. And then he left, went to Syria at the time, because he wanted to get married and settle down and stuff. And Syria was beautiful, by the way, before the war. I've been there 7 times. It's beautiful because it has that history to it. It's like France, you know what I'm saying? Like Holland, it still has all the history built. Anyway, that's but I'll come back to this guy. So this Wadi comes. Now, Hamas had a couple of offices. They had the office in Syria, they had the office in Jordan, they had the office in, let me try to remember. Anyway, even in Kuwait, they had the office, okay? Even in Saudi Arabia, they had the office, by the way. Anyway, so what happens here is he went to the office and he's like, by the way, can I help you? Can I help you guys with anything? I've done engineering and then I've done this. Are you listening to me, right?
Yes.
Just so I don't check it.
Yes.
Okay, boom. Now, at that time, Hamas had this thing where there was a graphic, I don't know what they call them, but like a graphic designer, a military graphic designer, right? Anyway, he was in Saddam's time. After Saddam was gone, he had the image of a drone. Like he had it all set up, everything, and what parts you need. But all you need is an engineer to come and put it all together. This guy, no one knows his name, but he called this SD. And he gave it to Hamas. He's like, I can't do it, but I'll give you, instead of giving it to the new Iraq government, because he's Sunni, he doesn't like them, he gave it to Hamas. Boom. So when Zwadi came, they're like, yes, we do have something. Can you help us out? He came, by the way, whatever the whole story I'm telling you, I can send you a documentary about it, because Israel spoke about it after. So Zwadi came, put it all together, and he was shocked. He was talking about it. They took him to Iran. And Iran didn't have all the parts. Guess what the second country that helped him out? I didn't think that country actually helps Hamas. Malaysia. So he went to Malaysia. Malaysia gave him a couple of parts that he needed, and he made the first Hamas drone. Okay? That drone is called Zwari right now. If you search it up, it'll come up. Now, after he made that drone, now at this time, no one knew anything. It was meant to be, because the Mossad is really strong at this, so it was meant to be quiet between them. After he done the drone, Zain al-Abidin, which was Tunis's leader, after the Arab Spring, was gone. He ran away to Saudi Arabia. So this guy went back to his country, and he became a university teacher. Now, until now, we're not meant to know all this story, right? Let me tell you why we know this story. While he's teaching at school, at university, I told you, because of the unemployment, the Mossad comes into the image. So what does Mossad do? They go and I think they went Italy, and they started recruiting two Tunisian girls. They're like, come through to Italy, we got your visa, and we'll get you a job, this, that. They gave them everything. The first thing they asked them to do is, do you have a brother or cousin? They're like, yes. They're like, okay, get them to go rent a car and leave it at the university. The other one, rent a car and leave it at the airport. So they did that, the two girls. And they gave them their money, and they gave them a chocolate, a box of a chocolate. They're like, try it out, it was really nice chocolate, and they left. Now, when they done this, one of the girls ate the chocolate, she's dead. Okay? At that time, the Mossad came with Canadian passports. They came, shot this guy, Zwari, the one who done the drone, and they left with these cars that were rented. The second girl didn't eat the chocolate. So she came back, she didn't know. She just came back to Tunis, and they arrested her, and they thought she was part of it, until she told them the whole story. Then they found out who killed him, why they killed him, because Hamas came out straight away after and said, yes, Zwari was part of us, and he's the guy who made us the drones. and then the Mossad came out, Israel came out and spoke about it. Now, what I'm trying to say about this whole story is, you make people go and want to help Hamas. You should be making people hate them in a way. Do you know what I'm saying? By being nice. Show that Hamas is bad. You're showing them Hamas is good. And I know Hamas is bad. I know, because when I was flying out, I was a transit to Turkey. I was talking to a couple of people from Gaza. And they're like, to be honest, Hamas is bad towards us, the people who live in Gaza. But you're pushing them towards Hamas by doing all this bullshit. Does that make sense? And you're pushing the whole world, by the way. Now, this Tunisian guy is one person, right? Imagine how many Muslims want to help right now, who are willing to go to Hamas and tell them, yes, I'll help you. They could be engineers, they could be scientists, they could be this, they could be that. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't even have to be governments. It could be people. And I told you, Zwari was one person. And Israel said it was one person who just thought, you know what, let me go help. And the other guy who gave them the graphic design of the drone was one person. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It would never end until you show that you're the nice person, Hamas the bad person.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta run. I gotta run. Let's talk another time. But great to catch up with you, Fahad. Thank you.